Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was reincarnated in Demon Slayer and got married to Mitsuri, Shinobu, and Kanao? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Sun-Kissed Stranger. The first thing he registered was the smell. It was wrong. Not the familiar scent of the land of fire's dense forests, a mixture of pine, damp earth, and the lingering ozone of powerful jutsu. This was different, deeper. The trees smelled ancient, their bark thick with moss that clung like a shroud. The air itself felt heavy, saturated with a cloying sweetness that was almost floral but held a metallic tang beneath it, like old blood. Naruto Uzumaki opened his eyes. A canopy of dark, unfamiliar leaves blotted out the sky, the slivers of sunlight that pierced through seeming alien and sharp. He pushed himself up, his body aching with a phantom pain that resonated from a battle he could only just grasp the edges of. The final valley, Sasuke, the clash of Rasengan and Chidori, the tearing of reality itself. Then, nothing. Now this. He was alone. The boisterous, rumbling presence that had been his companion since birth, the nine-tailed fox, was gone. The void, where Kurama's chakra once churned, was a hollow ache, a silence so profound it was almost a sound in itself. He reached for his own energy, expecting the familiar warmth of his reserves, but what he found was different. It was still there, vast and powerful, but it felt altered, purer. It no longer churned like a raging river but blazed with the steady, unbearable intensity of a miniature sun trapped within his coils. A scream tore through the forest's oppressive silence. It was thin, ragged, and filled with a terror so absolute it bypassed thought and went straight to instinct. Naruto was on his feet before he knew it, the aches in his body forgotten. His shinobi training, ingrained in every fiber of his being, took over. He moved through the strange, dense woods with a speed that blurred the foliage, his senses reaching out. Parsing the sounds, the scents, smoke, fear, and that coppery tang of blood, stronger now, fresher. He burst through a line of unnaturally thick trunk trees and into a clearing. A small village was burning. Thatched roofs were engulfed in orange flames that licked at the twilight sky. But the fire was not the source of the terror. It was the thing standing in the center of the village square. It was vaguely humanoid, with limbs that were too long and bent at angles that were sickeningly wrong. Its skin was the color of old ash, and its eyes, 6 of th. Arranged in a chaotic pattern on its face, glowed with a malevolent, hungry light. It held a struggling villager by the throat, long, talon-like fingers digging into the man's flesh. Other bodies lay scattered at its feet. Naruto didn't know what it was, but he knew what it was doing. And that was all that mattered. "Hey," he yelled, his voice cutting through the sounds of destruction. "Get your hands off him." The six-eyed creature turned its head, its neck cracking unnaturally. It dropped the man it held, a cruel, fanged grin splitting its face. "Oh, a late arrival to the feast. You have a fire in your spirit. I will enjoy devouring that the most." It moved with a speed that should have been impossible for its size, a blur of gray skin and sharp claws aimed directly at Naruto's heart. Naruto's body reacted without conscious thought. He sidestepped the lunge, his hand coming up to block, not with a kunai, but with the edge of his palm. He expected the familiar surge of chakra to reinforce the blow. What he got was a supernova. The energy that erupted from his hand wasn't the blue of the Rasengan or the simmering orange of Kurama's power. It was pure, blinding, golden light. It didn't just meet the demon's attack. It annihilated it. The creature shrieked, a sound of agony and disbelief, as its arm dissolved into nothingness, not burned, but utterly unmade. It staggered back, clutching the smoldering stump where its limb had been, its 6 eyes wide with a terror that dwarfed what its victims had felt. "The sun," it rasped, its voice choked with black, viscous smoke. "It's not morning. How do you hold the sun?" Naruto stared at his own hand, which was still glowing faintly with a gentle, golden warmth. He had no answer. He hadn't tried to do that. It had just happened. The power inside him felt instinctual, an extension of his will to protect. The demon, its survival instinct overriding its hunger, turned to flee. It scrambled towards the shadows of the burning buildings. its misshapen form scuttling like a broken insect. I don't think so, Naruto said, his voice low and hard. He pushed off the ground, closing the distance in an instant. This time, he focused his intent, gathering that strange, sun-like energy into his palm. It didn't swirl like the Rasengan. It condensed, forming a small, perfect sphere of unbearable light. He thrust it forward. The sphere struck the demon square in the back. There was no explosion, no concussive force. There was only light. A silent, all-consuming wave of golden energy washed over the creature. Its terrified shriek was cut short as its entire body simply ceased to be, turning to dust that scattered in the wind, leaving nothing behind but the stench of its own evil. The sudden silence was deafening. The surviving villagers stared, their faces a mixture of awe, gratitude, and primal fear. They weren't looking at a savior. They were looking at something just as incomprehensible as the monster that had been slaughtering them moments before. Naruto stood in the center of it all, his fist still clenched, the golden light slowly fading from his skin. He felt the weight of their stares, the familiar sting of being seen as something other. Something to be feared. Some things, it seemed, were the same in every world. He was about to say something, to try and offer a clumsy reassurance, when a new presence made itself known. It was a flutter of movement in the corner of his eye, as silent and graceful as a butterfly alighting on a flower. A woman stood on the roof of a nearby building, her silhouette framed against the smoke-filled sky. She wore a dark, uniform-like garment and a houri patterned with butterfly wings. A delicate, almost whimsical smile played on her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes, a stunning shade of violet, were sharp, analytical, and held a profound, ancient sadness that seemed at odds with her youthful appearance. She held a strangely shaped sword at her side, its hilt a simple, functional design. My, she said, her voice soft and melodic, yet carrying an edge of tempered steel. To think I'd find something so interesting in such a place. You incinerated that demon without a Nichiren blade. You don't even carry a blade at all. She tilted her head, her smile unwavering. Tell me, who are you? You don't smell quite human. But you certainly aren't a demon. Naruto met her gaze, his own senses on high alert. This woman was dangerous, not in the overt, monstrous way the creature had been, but in a quiet, precise manner. He could feel the power coiled within her, honed and disciplined. She was a warrior, a true one. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he said, his voice steady. He wasn't about to give away any more than that. Not until he understood what was happening. That thing was killing people. I stopped it. She hopped down from the roof, landing as silently as a falling leaf. She walked towards him, her movements fluid and controlled. She stopped a few feet away, her violet eyes scanning him from head to toe, taking in his tattered orange and black clothing, his strange whiskered cheeks, and the lingering aura of golden energy that clung to him. Indeed, you did, she conceded, her smile tightening just a fraction. And you did so with an ability I've never seen before. It was almost like a concentrated form of sunlight. Her gaze was piercing, a scalpel seeking to dissect his very soul. That is the only thing that can truly destroy a demon, aside from a demon slayer's blade. An ability like that is unheard of. Look, I don't know what to tell you, Naruto said, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. I don't know what that thing was, and I don't know how I did what I did. I just woke up in the woods a little while ago. The woman, Shinobu Kocho, let out a soft, airy laugh, though it held no mirth. You wake up in a forest with no memory and just happen to possess the one power that is anathema to demonkind. Orge of me if I find that a little difficult to believe. She took another step closer, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her sword. The Demon Slayer Corps has a duty to investigate any and all anomalies related to demons. And you, Naruto Uzumaki, are the biggest anomaly I have ever seen. A tense silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken threats and unanswered questions. The crack, of the dying fires was the only sound. Naruto could fight her, he was sure of it. Even with his chakra feeling so strange, his instincts screamed that he was faster, stronger. But he was also lost, confused, and utterly alone in a world he didn't understand. Fighting a potential ally seemed like a profoundly stupid move. I'm not your enemy, he said, letting his hands fall to his sides, keeping his posture open and non-threatening. I don't want to fight you. I just want to understand where I am. Shinobu studied him for a long moment, her violet eyes searching his for any hint of deception. She saw none. What she saw was a deep-seated exhaustion, a profound loneliness, and beneath it all, an unshakable core of determination. It was a look she had seen in the eyes of the best of her comrades. Her smile finally softened, becoming something a little more genuine. The strategic, cautious part of her brain was still screaming that he was a threat, an unknown variable that needed to be controlled. But another part, the part that recognized a kindred spirit in the fight against the darkness, saw an opportunity. A weapon, a miracle. Very well, Naruto Uzumaki, she said, her tone shifting from inquisitorial to something closer to welcoming. You have questions, and I have answers. You also appear to be injured and far from home. Our organization is equipped to help with such things. She gestured with a delicate hand towards the path leading away from the smoldering village. Come with me, I will take you to the Butterfly Mansion. You can rest, get medical attention, and we can talk. The offer was clear, an invitation wrapped around a command. It was a place of healing and a gilded cage, all in one. Naruto weighed his options. He had none. He was in a foreign land, hunted by monsters he didn't understand. And possessing a power he couldn't explain. This woman, for all her dangerous poise, was the first person to offer something other than violence. She was offering a path forward. All right, he said with a nod. Butterfly Mansion it is. He followed her away from the village, leaving the grateful but fearful whispers of the survivors behind. As they walked through the dark, wisteria-lined paths, a flower Shinobu explained was a natural demon repellent, she began to speak. She told him of demons, creatures of the night that fed on humans, of their master, Muzan Kibutsuji. And of the Demon Slayer Corps, a secret organization that had waged a silent war against them for centuries. Naruto listened, absorbing the grim reality of this world. It was a different kind of war from the one he had known. Not a clash of nations and ideologies, but a desperate struggle for humanity's very survival against an existential, predatory threat. It was simpler, sharper, and in many ways, more terrifying. He spoke little of his own past, offering only vague allusions to a great war and a life left behind. Every word from Shinobu only confirmed how far from home he truly was. Hours later, as the first hints of dawn threatened to break the horizon, they arrived. The Butterfly Mansion was a sprawling estate, larger than the Hokage's residence, radiating an aura of calm and order amidst the chaos of the world. It was part hospital, part training ground, part home. Young girls in neat uniforms bustled about, tending to gardens and airing out laundry, their movements efficient and practiced. The air smelled of medicine and clean linen, a stark contrast to the blood and smoke of the village. Shinobu led him through the polished wooden corridors to a simple, clean room with a futon and a small table. Rest here, she said, her smile returning to its polite, unreadable default. Someone will bring you food and a change of clothes. We will speak more after you have recovered. She slid the door shut, leaving him alone in the quiet room. Naruto walked to the window, looking out at the meticulously kept gardens. He was a prisoner, he knew, albeit a comfortable one. A specimen to be studied. But he was also safe, for the moment. He had a roof over his head and a lead on understanding this new, terrible world. He thought of the life he had lost. The friends he had fought and bled for. The village he had sworn to protect. A wave of grief, sharp and overwhelming, washed over him. He was a leaf torn from his tree, sent spiraling into a strange, new forest. But he was still a leaf from Konoha. He still had his will, his strength. And the people of this world, he now knew, were in desperate need of both. He closed his eyes, the image of the six-eyed demon dissolving into ash replaying in his mind. The power that coursed through him, this blazing, sun-forged energy, was a mystery. But it was his mystery. And he would learn to wield it. He had to. Because as long as creatures like that existed, as long as people were screaming in the dark, his path was clear. He would protect them. In a world drowning in darkness, Naruto Uzumaki would become their son. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Wisteria. Naruto awoke to the scent of medicinal herbs and clean linen. For a disorienting moment, he expected to see the sterile white walls of the Konoha hospital. Maybe with Sakura ready to lecture him about reckless behavior. But the ceiling above him was dark, polished wood, and the light filtering through the shoji screen was soft and unfamiliar. The butterfly mansion. Right. His tattered orange and black jumpsuit was gone, replaced by a simple, comfortable yukata. His body felt clean, the grime and blood of the previous night washed away. Someone had tended to him while he slept. He sat up, the phantom aches of his final battle a distant memory, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that was more spiritual than physical. The silence where Kurama used to be was a constant, hollow hum in the back of his mind. He slid open the door and stepped into the hallway. The mansion was a hive of quiet, purposeful activity. Young girls, their FACES set with a seriousness that belied their age, moved through the corridors carrying trays of medicine and bundles of fresh bandages. Their footsteps were soft, their voices hushed. This was a place of healing. But it was a warrior's healing, a place designed to put broken bodies back together just enough to be thrown back into the fray. The air of gentle tranquility was a thin veil over a deep, pervasive sorrow. A girl with twin tails and a stern expression approached him. She looked him up and down, her gaze clinical. "You're awake. Kocho-sama said you would be. I am Aoi Kanzaki. I am in charge of the recovery training here. You will eat, and then Kocho-sama will want to see you." "Thanks. I'm Naruto." "I know," she said, her tone leaving no room for pleasantries. She led him to a dining area where a simple but hearty breakfast of rice, grilled fish, and miso soup was waiting. As he ate, Naruto watched the rhythm of the mansion. He saw the wounded, slayers with missing limbs and bandaged eyes. Their spirits flickering but not extinguished. He saw the rigorous training in the courtyard, the endless, repetitive swings of wooden swords, the punishing physical conditioning. Every person here, from the youngest helper to the most battle-scarred warrior, was dedicated to a single, all-consuming purpose: killing demons. After his meal, he found his way outside. The grounds were immaculate, a stark contrast to the wild, untamed forest he had woken up in. Wisteria trees, heavy with their drooping purple blossoms, were everywhere, their sweet scent a constant, calming presence. He knew from Shinobu they were a demon repellent. Here, even the flowers were part of the war effort. In a quiet corner of the garden, near a koi pond, a girl was sitting on a stone bench. She had a BUTTER fly ornament in her side ponytail and wore the same standard demon slayer uniform, though she carried herself with a stillness that was almost unnatural. In her hand, she held a small, bronze coin. Naruto had seen her briefly the night before, one of the silent figures in Shinobu's wake. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. She didn't look up, her attention fixed entirely on the coin. He sat on the other end of the bench, giving her plenty of space, and watched the orange and white koi drift lazily through the water. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was just quiet. After a few minutes, he reached into the pouch he'd been given with his new clothes and pulled out a rice ball saved from breakfast. He held it out to her without a word. Her eyes, a gentle shade of lilac, finally lifted from the coin to look at him. She seemed surprised by the simple gesture. Her gaze flickered down to the coin, then back to his outstretched hand. For a long moment, she did nothing. Then, slowly, as if the movement required immense concentration, she reached out and took the rice ball. Her fingers brushed his, and they were cool to the touch. She didn't eat it, just held it in her lap. "This is a good place to watch the clouds," Naruto said, leaning back and looking up at the sky. He didn't ask her name, didn't ask about the coin. He just shared the moment. The girl didn't respond. Instead, she brought her coin up, her thumb poised to flip it. But she hesitated. Her gaze drifted from the coin to the sky, watching a wisp of a cloud drift by. The coin remained untossed. It was, for her, a monumental act of indecision, a tiny crack in a carefully constructed dam. Their shared quiet was abruptly shattered by a whirlwind of joyous energy. "Shinobu-chan, I brought you some sakura mochi. The new place in town is simply divine." "Oh." A young woman with bright pink hair that faded to green at the tips came skipping into the garden, her face alight with an infectious grin. She was dressed in a modified, more revealing version of the Slayer uniform, covered by a white haori. Her eyes, a startling shade of light green, landed on Naruto, and they widened with unabashed curiosity. "Oh my, you must be the new person Shinobu-chan told me about. The one with the sunny hair. It's true. It's like a big, fluffy dandelion." She bounced on the balls of her feet, radiating an aura of pure, unfiltered enthusiasm. "I'm Mitsuri Kanroji, the love Hashira. It's a pleasure to meet you." Naruto blinked, taken aback by the sudden explosion of cheerfulness. It was like a hurricane. Of happiness had just made landfall on his quiet bench. He couldn't help but grin back. "Naruto Uzumaki, nice to meet you too. Naruto-kun," she chirped, testing the name. "It fits. So strong." "Obu-chan said you fought a demon without even a sword. Is that true? How did you do it? Was it like, wham, and swoosh, and then it just went, poof?" She punctuated her questions with wild gestures, her body a constant stream of motion. "Something like that," he chuckled, finding her energy strangely familiar and comforting. It reminded him of his own younger self. Mitsuri's eyes then fell on the girl next to him. "Oh, Kanao-chan. Hello. Are you enjoying the sunshine?" The girl, Kanao, merely offered a serene, almost blank smile in response, still clutching the rice ball. Mitsuri didn't seem to mind the lack of conversation. Her attention was already snagged by a set of large, heavy-looking training boulders nearby. "I need to keep up my strength," she declared. "Do you train, Naruto-kun? You look incredibly strong. I bet you could lift this one." She pointed to a boulder easily the size of a small cart. Before Naruto could respond, she trotted over to it, gripped the underside, and with a cheerful grunt, hoisted it over her head, her muscles flexing with a power that seemed utterly at odds with her slender frame. Naruto's jaw dropped. "Whoa, you're really strong," she giggled, setting the boulder down gently. "Have to swing my sword. It's a special one, very wiggly." She beamed at him, a genuine, unpretentious pride in her own strength. "Oh, you must try one of these." She produced a Sakura mochi from a small cloth bundle and held it out to him. "It'll give you energy." Their conversation was light and easy, a rapid-fire exchange of Naruto's surprise at her strength and her endless curiosity about him. They bonded over the simple joy of good food and the shared language of physical power. In a place so defined by pain and duty, Mitsuri was a defiant spark of pure, unadulterated life. Naruto found himself drawn to it like a moth to a flame. "It seems you are making friends, Naruto-san." The voice, calm and melodic, cut through their cheerful banter. Shinobu stood by the edge of the garden, her ever-present smile fixed in place. Mitsuri immediately straightened up. "Shinobu-chan, I was just introducing myself to Naruto-kun." "So I see," Shinobu said, her eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. "Mitsuri, your checkup is in 10 minutes. Naruto-san, if you would be so kind as to join me in the dojo. I would like to properly gauge your abilities." It was a polite invitation, but the undertone was unmistakable. It was a summons, a test. The dojo was a spacious, airy room with polished wooden floors that gleamed in the afternoon light. Racks of wooden swords and training weapons lined the walls. Shinobu slid the doors shut behind them, enclosing them in a sudden, serious silence. "I will not use a poison-laced blade," she said, selecting a standard katana from the rack instead of her own uniquely shaped weapon. "This will be a simple test of skill." "All right," Naruto said, rolling his shoulders. He didn't pick up a weapon. He didn't need one. He settled into a loose, low stance, a variation of the Academy Taijutsu form that had been drilled into him since he was a child. It was a stance that prioritized adaptability and unpredictability. Shinobu's smile didn't falter, but her eyes sharpened. She saw the subtle confidence in his posture, the way his weight was perfectly balanced, ready to move in any direction. This was no amateur. She moved first. She was a blur, a flicker of motion that was less a charge and more a teleportation. Her blade aimed not for a vital point, but for his shoulder, a precise, testy thrust designed to cripple and control. Her speed was incredible, far faster than any non-shinobi he had ever seen. But Naruto's world had been defined by speed. He had fought opponents who moved like lightning. He swayed to the side, the tip of her blade whispering past his uniform by a hair's breadth. He didn't counterattack. He just moved, his feet a seamless dance of avoidance. Shinobu pressed her attack, her movements a dizzying display of grace and lethality. Her style was all forward momentum, a relentless series of thrusts from every conceivable angle, like the stinging of a hornet. She was trying to overwhelm him, to force him into a mistake. Naruto flowed around her, a leaf on the wind. He saw every thrust before it was completed, his battle-honed instinct screaming warnings his eyes could barely keep up with. He was faster, he realized, and stronger, but brute force wasn't the point of this exercise. This was a conversation, and he needed to give the right answers. As she lunged again, aiming for his leg, Naruto slapped a hand to the floor. Shadow Clone Jutsu. With a puff of smoke, a perfect duplicate of himself appeared behind her. Shinobu's eyes widened in genuine shock, her flawless composure finally cracking. The sheer impossibility of it, a second opponent materializing out of thin air, was outside of her entire frame of reference. The momentary hesitation was all Naruto needed. The clone feinted an attack, drawing her attention. The real Naruto slipped inside her guard, his hand open. He didn't strike her. Instead, his palm came to rest flat against the blade of her katana. A small, controlled pulse of the golden sun energy flowed from his hand into the metal. The steel didn't glow, but it instantly became unbearably hot. With a surprised yelp, Shinobu was forced to drop the sword, which clattered to the floor, smoking faintly. The clone dispersed in another puff of smoke. Silence. Naruto stood before her, his hand still outstretched. "I told you," he said softly. "I don't want to fight you." Shinobu stared at her hand, then at the sword on the floor, and finally at him. Her smile was gone. In its place was a look of raw, unfiltered astonishment and a deep, calculating curiosity. She had tested his power, and what she had found was something beyond her comprehension. He wasn't just strong. He was controlled, strategic, and possessed abilities that defied all logic. She finally let out a long, slow breath, and her smile returned, though this time it seemed a little less like a mask. "You have passed, Naruto-san." With flying colors, she picked up her sword, her fingers carefully avoiding the still warm blade. "Your skills are unorthodox, but undeniably effective." She sheathed the blade and faced him, her posture more relaxed now. The test was over. The debriefing was about to begin. "I trust you are beginning to understand the nature of our fight. Creatures of the night that eat people," Naruto summarized. "Run by a guy named Muzan. And you guys are the only ones who can stop them." "Aptly put," she said. "But lately, our fight has become more difficult. The demons we are encountering are changing. Even the weaker ones are displaying abnormal strength, increased regeneration. They are more frenzied, more vicious. It is as if some unseen hand is stirring the pot, agitating them." She was sharing intelligence. It was a significant gesture, a deliberate step towards inclusion. She was moving him from the category of unknown anomaly to potential asset. "Something is making them stronger," Naruto mused, a prickle of unease running down his spine. "Precisely," Shinobu affirmed, her violet eyes holding his. "We do not yet know the cause, but the effect is clear. Our losses are mounting. We need more than just skilled swordsmen. We need an advantage, something unexpected." The implication hung in the air between them, as sharp and clear as her blade had been. She was talking about him. Later that night, Naruto found himself on the roof of the mansion, the cool night air a welcome relief. The moon hung in the sky, a familiar, silent witness. It was the same moon he'd stared at from the top of the Hokage monument 1,000 times. Yet it felt a world away. He thought about his day, about the haunted stillness of Kanao and the small flicker of independent thought he had seen in her eyes. He thought of Mitsuri's bright, dazzling spirit, a supernova of joy in a world choked with darkness. And he thought of Shinobu, her brilliant mind and the profound sadness she hid behind her smile. These people, this world, were caught in a desperate, grinding war for survival. They fought and died in the shadows, their sacrifices unknown and unsung by the larger world they protected. It wasn't about glory or recognition. It was about seeing the next sunrise. He was no longer the child of prophecy. The fate of his world was no longer on his shoulders. That story had ended in the valley. But a new one was beginning here. He was alone, untethered, a stranger in a strange land. But he was not without purpose. He looked down at his hands, feeling the warm, golden energy that rested just beneath his skin. He didn't know where it came from. But he knew what it was for. He closed his eyes. The faces of his old friends, his Team 7, his teachers, flashed through his mind. He would carry them with him, always. But his path was here now. His fight was here. He would not be a guest in this war. He would not be a specimen to be studied. He would be a shield. He would be a sword. He would be the sun that broke the long, dark night. A new resolve settled in his heart, quiet but unbreakable. He would protect this world. He would protect its people. He would become a demon slayer. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Crimson Fox and the Love Hashira. Naruto's official entry into the Demon Slayer Corps was less a ceremony and more a series of practical, hurried necessities. He was given a standard uniform, ta, allured to his frame with remarkable speed by the ever-efficient girls of the Butterfly Mansion. It was a simple, dark gakurin, functional and durable, a stark contrast to the vibrant orange that had been his signature for so long. He felt like a different person wearing it, less the boisterous knucklehead of Konoha and more a quiet, nameless soldier in a long, dark war. He couldn't wield a Nichiren blade. The special ore, the scarlet crimson iron sand and scarlet crimson ore, was designed to absorb sunlight, something Naruto now produced internally. When he held a standard katana, it grew uncomfortably hot, the metal humming with a suppressed energy it couldn't contain. After a near-disastrous training session where a blade simply melted in his grip, a different solution was found. The master swordsmith, Hotaru Hagenezuka, had thrown an epic, week-long tantrum at the thought of someone rejecting his blades, but Shinobu's quiet, smiling threats had eventually persuaded him to try something new. The result was a pair of custom-forged, black metal gauntlets and greaves. They were made from a unique alloy, designed not to channel Naruto's power, but to withstand it, focusing the solar energy he emitted from his hands and feet into more controlled, devastating strikes. They felt right. They felt like an extension of himself in a way a sword never could. His first assignment came on a crisp autumn morning. A Kasugai crow, a creature that still unnerved him with its croaking, articulate speech, landed on his shoulder. South-southwest, to the village of Kirihata. People are vanishing. Go with the Love Hashira. Mitsuri Kanroji, vanishing. He found Mitsuri by the main gate, her bright, cheerful presence a beacon in the early morning light. She was practically vibrating with excitement, her custom-made, whip-like Nichiren blade coiled at her side. Naruto-kun, our first mission together. Isn't it exciting? I heard Kirihata is famous for its silk weavers. They make the most beautiful fabrics. And they have a dango shop that's supposed to be the best in the prefecture. Naruto couldn't help but smile. Her boundless enthusiasm was a force of nature. As long as we find the demon before it eats the dango maker. She giggled, a sound like wind chimes. Right, priorities. Protect the people, protect the dango. Let's go. The journey to Kirihata took them through Raleigh. Hills painted in the fiery colors of autumn. They moved at a pace that would have left most shinobi breathless, a testament to the superhuman conditioning of the demon slayers. Mitsuri was a constant stream of cheerful chatter, pointing out interesting cloud shapes, describing her favorite foods in loving, painstaking detail, and asking Naruto 1,000 questions about himself. He answered vaguely, painting a picture of a distant, war-torn home without giving away the impossible truth. He found that talking to her was easy. She listened with her whole being, her expressive face showing every flicker of emotion. Kirihata was a village nestled in a valley, famous for the rhythmic clacking of its weaving looms. But as they entered, they were greeted not by the sounds of industry, but by a heavy, fearful silence. The streets were nearly deserted. Doors were shuttered, and the few villagers they saw scurried away, their faces pale with anxiety, refusing to meet their eyes. This feels wrong, Naruto said, his voice low. The air was thick with a palpable sense of dread. It feels lonely, Mitsuri added, her usual smile dimming. Like all the happiness has been drained away. They found the village elder, a frail man with fear etched into every line on his face. He told them the story in a hushed, trembling voice. It had started a month ago. People simply vanished from their homes at night. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken doors, no screams. One night, A husband would go to sleep next to his wife, and in the morning, she would be gone, the bedsheets still warm where she had lain. It was always the young, the hopeful, the ones with dreams for the future. Over a dozen had disappeared. It's like they were spirited away, the elder whispered, wringing his hands. Taken by a ghost that preys on love. As they left the elder's home, Mitsuri's expression was uncharacteristically grim. A demon that targets love, that's unforgivable. They began their investigation, splitting up to cover more ground. Naruto used his shinobi skills, moving through the shadows, listening to the hushed whispers of the villagers. He learned that all the victims had one thing in common. They were all deeply in love or passionately dedicated to their craft. A young weaver betrothed to be married, a dyer who dreamed of creating a new color, a musician whose songs captivated the village. The demon wasn't just feeding on flesh, it was feeding on passion. He met up with Mitsuri in the village square as dusk began to settle, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. She had reached the same conclusion. It's preying on their hearts, she said, her hands clenched into fists. It finds what they desire most and uses it to lure them away. So we need bait, Naruto said, his gaze hardening. Bait that shines brighter than anyone else here. Mitsuri's eyes widened as she understood. You mean, one of us? It's our best shot, he confirmed. We find an isolated place. And one of us acts like the perfect target. The other waits. I'll do it, Mitsuri said immediately, her voice firm. My name is the Love Hashira. If a demon is hunting love, it will not be able to resist me. There was no arrogance in her voice, only a statement of fact. Her entire being was an ode to passion, to connection, to love in all its forms. She was the ultimate lure. They chose an abandoned weaver's workshop at the edge of the village. It was a large, drafty building filled with silent, dust-covered looms that looked like skeletal remains in the fading light. Mitsuri sat in the center of the room, humming a soft tune. Projecting an aura of unguarded, hopeful longing. Naruto concealed himself in the rafters above, his presence suppressed, his senses stretched to their absolute limit. He became one with the shadows. A silent, patient hunter. Hours passed. The moon rose, casting long, distorted shadows across the workshop floor. The only sound was Mitsuri's gentle humming the whisper of the wind through the building's cracks. Naruto remained perfectly still, his focus absolute. He could feel the cold seeping into the wood around him, could smell the damp earth beneath the floorboards. Then, he felt it. A subtle shift in the air. A drop in temperature. A scent, sickly sweet like rotting flowers, wafted through the room. It was here. Mitsuri stopped humming, her head tilted slightly, as if listening to a sound only she could hear. A soft, hazy mist began to seep up from the floorboards, swirling around her ankles. It shimmered with a faint, ethereal light. Is that you, Oba-san? Mitsuri whispered, her voice filled with a childlike wonder that sent a chill down Naruto's spine. It wasn't an act. The demon was already inside her head. Naruto watched, his muscles coiled tight, ready to spring. He had to wait for the demon to reveal its physical form. Striking now would be like punching smoke. The mist grew thicker, coalescing in front of Mitsuri. It took the shape of a kind-faced, elderly woman. A figure that seemed to radiate warmth and affection. Mitsuri-chan, the illusion said, its voice a perfect imitation of gentle love. I've missed you. You've grown so strong. But you're still so worried, aren't you? Worried that no one will ever accept you for who you are. Mitsuri's breath hitched. Naruto could see the genuine pain and vulnerability in her eyes. This demon was a master of psychological warfare, using its victims' deepest insecurities against them. They will, the illusion cooed, reaching out a misty hand. Come with me. I know a place where you can be yourself. Where your strength is celebrated, and you can eat as much as you like without anyone judging you. A place where you will find the love you deserve. Mitsuri's face, a mask of longing and old hurts, began to soften. She started to rise, her hand reaching out to take the illusions. Now, Naruto dropped from the rafters, a silent black shadow. He didn't aim for the illusion. He aimed for the floor right behind it. Rasengan. He slammed a swirling sphere of his normal, wind-natured chakra, not the sun energy, into the floorboards. The attack was controlled, contained. Designed not for destruction but for disruption. The floor exploded upwards in a shower of splinters and dust. The illusion flickered and dissolved with a hiss of frustration. From the newly formed crater in the floor, a creature emerged. It was grotesque, with a body like a tangled knot of pale roots, and a face that was a blank, porcelain mask, its only feature a single, weeping eye in the center. "You ruined the moment," the demon shrieked, its voice a discordant symphony of all the victims it had consumed. Her despair was about to be so sweet. The shock of the attack snapped Mitsuri out of her trance. Her eyes widened, then narrowed into slits of pure fury. The gentle, lovesick girl was gone, replaced by the formidable presence of a Hashira. You prey on people's hearts," she snarled, her whip-like blade unfurling with a sound like tearing silk. Love breathing, first form, shivers of first love. She launched herself forward, a pink blur of motion. Her blade danced through the air, a whirlwind of graceful, arcing slashes that seemed to defy physics, cutting through the demon's root-like appendages. The demon scrambled back, its limbs regenerating almost as fast as she could sever them. "Your love is strong, but your fear is stronger. What if he," it gurgled, its single eye fixing on Naruto, "thinks you're a monster? A freak, for your unnatural strength, for your strange hair. What man would ever want a wife like that?" Each word was a poisoned dart aimed at the very core of Mitsuri's deepest insecurities. She faltered for a split second, a flicker of doubt crossing her face. That was all the opening the demon needed. Roots shot up from the floor, wrapping around her limbs, holding her fast. "Mitsuri!" Naruto yelled. He charged forward, his black gauntlets glowing with a faint golden light. But the demon's eye swiveled to him. The world around Naruto warped, the dusty workshop melting away. Suddenly, he was standing in the Valley of the End. Across the water, Sasuke stood with a Chidori crackling in his hand, his eyes cold and full of hatred. Behind him, the faces of Jiraiya, of Neji, of his parents, all looked at him with expressions of profound disappointment. "You failed them," a voice whispered in his mind, the demon's voice wearing Sasuke's face. "You couldn't save me, you couldn't save anyone, you let them all die. What kind of hero are you?" The illusion was powerful, pulling at the deepest regrets of his soul. The grief was a physical weight, threatening to crush him. For a moment, he was paralyzed. "Naruto-kun," Mitsuri's voice cut through the illusion like a blade. It was strained, but full of a fierce, unwavering belief. He looked past the phantom of Sasuke and saw her, struggling against her bonds, her eyes fixed on him. They weren't filled with judgment or fear. They were filled with trust. She wasn't seeing a failure. She was seeing her partner. The illusion shattered. The workshop snapped back into focus. The demon was momentarily stunned. Its concentration broken. "My strength isn't a curse," Mitsuri shouted, her muscles bulging as she strained against the roots. "And my hair is lovely. And if someone is too scared to see that, then they aren't the one for me." With a final, explosive roar, she tore the roots apart through sheer physical power. Naruto grinned, a fierce, proud expression on his face. "That's the way." He appeared in front of the demon in a flash. "You want to see what a monster looks like?" Shadow Clone Jutsu. 10 Narutos appeared, surrounding the demon. They attacked in a coordinated storm of kicks and punches. Their movements a blur. It was pure, classic Uzumaki taijutsu, a chaotic, unpredictable dance of feints and attacks that overwhelmed the demon's senses. The demon shrieked, lashing out wildly. But the clones were too numerous, too fast. It was completely disoriented. "Now, Mitsuri!" The real Naruto yelled, leaping back. Mitsuri was already in motion, her blade a flowing ribbon of deadly steel. Love breathing, sixth form. Cat-legged winds of love. She cartwheeled through the air, her body impossibly flexible, her blade raining down a hurricane of slashes that shredded the demon's regenerating limbs. Clearing a path to its neck, she landed gracefully, her blade poised for the final strike. "It's over," she cried. Naruto, seeing his chance, focused his power. The gaunt, lead on his right hand began to blaze with golden light, not a sphere, but a flat, concentrated blade of pure sun energy extending from his knuckles. He moved in perfect sync with her. He brought his unforged blade down at the exact same moment her Nichiren blade sliced through. The demon's head, severed by two different but equally absolute powers, flew from its shoulders. It had no time to scream. No time to even register its own demise. Its body and head dissolved into ash before they even hit the ground. Silence descended on the workshop, broken only by their heavy breathing. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of moonlight piercing the gloom. Mitsuri stood for a moment, her body trembling slightly from exertion and adrenaline. Then she turned to Naruto, a brilliant, teary-eyed smile breaking across her face. "We did it. We really did it. You were amazing. Poof. And then there were so many of you. And then you went. Swoosh, with your sunny hand." He laughed, the tension draining away. "You were the one who broke its hold. You're incredible, Mitsuri." Later, they sat in the village's only open noodle stand, the aroma of hot broth chasing away the last of the night's chill. The villagers, freed from the grip of fear, had already begun to emerge, the sounds of life slowly returning to Kirihata. They ate in a comfortable silence for a while, both ravenously hungry. Mitsuri, true to form, ordered 3 large bowls and devoured them with a gusto that Naruto found utterly charming. "Thank you," she said suddenly, setting down her empty bowl. Her expression was serious, her usual bubbly energy replaced by a quiet sincerity. "For not looking at me like I was a monster." "What are you talking about?" Naruto asked, confused. "You were amazing. When I broke those TS, that's the strength that scared everyone away back home," she said, looking down at her hands. "It's why I first joined the Corps. I thought if I could use my strength to help people, maybe someone would finally accept me. But I'm still scared of it sometimes." Naruto reached across the table and gently tapped her hand with his finger. She looked up, her light green eyes wide. "Anyone who would be scared of that strength is an idiot," he said, his voice soft but firm. "It's a part of you. It's what makes you strong enough to protect people. It's what makes you, you. And you are awesome." A single tear rolled down Mitsuri's cheek, followed by another. But she was smiling, a wobbly, radiant smile that was the most beautiful thing Naruto had ever seen. "You really think so?" "I know so," he said. In that small, noodle-scented moment, under the light of a paper lantern, something shifted between them. It was more than just the camaraderie of a shared battle. It was a spark of genuine connection, of understanding and acceptance. Naruto felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the sun energy in his veins. It was the feeling of finding a kindred spirit in a new, lonely world. A feeling that maybe, just maybe, he could find a home here after all. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. A Dance of Poison and Sunlight. The mission came directly from Kagaya Ubuyashiki, the master of the Demon Slayer Corps. His voice, a gentle balm even when delivering the gravest of news, had summoned them to the main estate. Naruto stood beside Shinobu, the stark difference in their demeanors on full display. He was a pillar of solid, sun-warmed rock, his hands tucked into the pockets of his uniform, while she was a butterfly poised for flight, her serene smile a mask of perfect discipline. "The village of Yakushi lies deep in the mountains to the north," Ubuyashiki said, his face, ravaged by a curse, turned towards the garden they could not see. "It is a place known for its hot springs and medicinal herbs. But a plague has fallen upon it. A poison so virulent it kills within a day. It is not a natural disease. Our local agents believe it to be the work of a demon." His calm, knowing eyes, clouded by the curse, seemed to fix on each of them in turn. "Shinobu, your expertise in poison and medicine is unparalleled. You are our only hope of finding a cure. Naruto-kun, your unique constitution and resilience make you the perfect shield. You will escort Shinobu, protect her while she works, and help her eliminate the source. I trust you both implicitly." It was not a request. It was a statement of faith. A strategic pairing of the corpse's sharpest scalpel and its most indestructible shield. Naruto nodded, a simple, firm gesture. Shinobu bowed gracefully. "We will not fail you, Oyakata-sama." Their journey north was a study in contrasts. They moved swiftly through dense cedar forests and over treacherous mountain passes. Shinobu was a creature of precision and efficiency. Every step was measured, every rest break calculated for maximum recovery. She used the travel time to study charts of the region and review pharmacological texts, her mind a relentless engine of logic. Naruto, on the other hand, was guided by a deeper, more primal rhythm. He moved with an easy, loping gait, his senses constantly tasting the air, reading the subtle shifts in the environment. D point out a broken twig that indicated a boar's passage or a distant bird call that signaled a predator. He was a part of the wilderness, not just a traveler passing through it. You rely heavily on instinct. Shinobu observed one evening as they made camp. She was meticulously grinding herbs for a restorative tea, her movements small and exact. It's gotten me this far, Naruto replied, expert L. Why starting a smokeless fire with a small burst of chakra, a trick he'd perfected over years of Anbu-level missions. You can't think your way out of a bear trap. Sometimes you just have to feel where it is. A charmingly simplistic philosophy, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. But a demon is not a bear trap. It is a puzzle of biology and intent. To defeat it, you must first understand it. Dissect its motives, its methods, its weaknesses. Rage and instinct are blunt instruments. Rage gets the job done, Naruto countered, his tone hardening slightly as he thought of enemies past. And my instincts tell me when someone's hiding something. Like the sadness you hide behind that smile. The grinding stopped. The air grew still and cold. Shinobu's smile remained perfectly, unnervingly in place. But a dangerous glint entered her violet eyes. And my professional opinion, as a medical expert, is that you should refrain from making diagnoses outside of your field of expertise. The tension was a blade drawn between them. It wasn't hostile, not truly, but it was a clear delineation of their opposing worldviews. Shinobu's world was one of cold, hard facts, of vengeance distilled into a perfect poison. Naruto's was a world of messy emotions, of connections forged and broken, of finding the human core even in the most monstrous of beings. They arrived at Yakushi at dawn. And the scene that greeted them was one of quiet, creeping horror. There was no fire, no blood in the streets. There was only the unnerving silence of a village holding its breath. The air itself felt sick, heavy with the scent of decay and despair. The few people they saw moved like ghosts, their faces hollow, their eyes empty. The village temple had been converted into a makeshift infirmary. Dozens of people lay on futons, their bodies trembling, their skin a pale, clammy gray. Their breaths were shallow, rattling things. A local doctor, a man whose face was a mask of exhausted defeat, explained the symptoms. It began with a numbness in the limbs, followed by paralysis, and finally, a peaceful, silent death as their lungs simply forgot how to work. Shinobu was instantly in her element. He shed the persona of the warrior and became the doctor, her voice calm and authoritative, a beacon of competence in a sea of despair. She drew blood, examined patients, and issued a string of précis orders that sent Naruto and his newly summoned shadow clones scrambling for herbs, clean water, and supplies. He became an extension of her will, a tireless, multi-limbed force multiplier that allowed her to be in 10 places at once. He watched her work, amazed at the speed and clarity of her thought. She saw patterns in the chaos, her mind piecing together the puzzle of the poison with a terrifying genius. It's a neurotoxin, she murmured hours later, squinting at a sample under a portable microscope. Incredibly complex. It mimics the body's own neurotransmitters, but it delivers a message of cessation. It tells the nerves to simply stop working. It's elegant, diabolical. While she worked on an antidote, Naruto's instincts screamed at him. This wasn't random. The poison was too precise, too intentional. He left a clone to continue assisting Shinobu and followed a feeling, a faint wrongness on the wind. His senses, honed to detect the slightest trace of malevolent energy, led him up the mountain. Towards the village's water source, a clear, steaming hot spring that fed into a stream. The water itself felt clean, but near the spring's source, hidden behind a curtain of rock and steam, he found it. A faint, almost invisible residue clung to the rocks, smelling faintly of wisteria and something metallic and corrupt. The demon was poisoning the entire village at its source. He followed the faint trail away from the spring, deeper into a cave system hidden by the steam. He returned to the temple just as Shinobu isolated the poison's primary agent. I found its nest, he said, his voice grim. It's in the caves above the spring. I'm close to a temporary counter-agent, she said, not looking up from her work. It won't be a cure, but it will buy them time. I need 1 more hour. You've got it, he said. Keep a clone with you. I'll go draw its attention. Do not engage it alone. Naruto-san, she warned, her tone sharp. Its methods are insidious. It will not fight you on your terms. Don't worry. He grinned, a flash of his old, confident self. I'm not planning on fighting it. I'm planning on annoying it. Naruto moved through the caves like a ghost. He found the demon's lair in a large, central cavern. It was a grotesque mockery of a laboratory. Beakers and distillation tubes, likely stolen from the village doctor, were set up over geothermal vents. Ca. Chests containing half-dead animals lined the walls, victims of failed experiments. And in the center stood the demon. It was tall and gaunt, dressed in the tattered remains of a doctor's coat. Its skin was the color of formaldehyde, and its long, slender fingers, each tipped with a hollow, needle-like claw, drummed impatiently on a stone table. It had no eyes, only a smooth, placid face that seemed to listen to the world rather than see it. An intruder, the demon hissed, its head snapping up, sniffing the air. You reek of vitality, of the sun. You are an affront to this perfect, sterile world I am creating. Sterile is one word for it, Naruto called out from the shadows. I was thinking more along the lines of mass-murdering creep. He didn't attack. He zipped from shadow to shadow, throwing rocks to create diversions. Using his clones to lead the demon on a wild chase through the tunnels. He was a gnat, an irritation, a deliberate distraction designed to keep the demon's focus away from the village below. The demon grew increasingly enraged. Fight me, you coward. Face my grand work. I am curing this world of its disease. The disease of weakness, of pointless struggle. I offer a clean, quiet end. A mercy. Finally, Shinobu arrived, silent as a falling moth, her blade in her hand. The only disease here, she said, her voice dripping with ice, is you. The battle began. The demon was not a physical powerhouse. It fought with its intellect, using the cave system to its advantage. It released clouds of poisonous gas, fired darts of concentrated toxins from its fingertips, and used its knowledge of anatomy to strike at nerve clusters with horrifying precision. It was a fight perfectly suited to Shinobu. She moved like a dancer, her haori fluttering behind her, her blade a silver blur. She wasn't trying to sever its head, her blade was designed for injection. Insect breathing, dance of the bee sting, true flutter. She called, her body seeming to twist in midair, as she delivered a blindingly fast thrust that injected a dose of her own custom-made wisteria poison into the demon's torso. The demon staggered back, clutching its chest. Poison against poison. Futile. My body is a crucible of toxicology. Your pathetic concoctions only make me stronger. It absorbed her poison, analyzed it, and adapted, its flesh sizzling and reforming. Its eyeless face turned towards her, a cruel smile spreading across its blank features. I can smell the poison in your own heart, Hashira. That rage you hide behind your pretty smile. It's a bitter, lonely thing. All for a sister who died for a foolish ideal. Wasn't it? She believed even demons could be pitied. Tell me, in her final moments, choking on her own blood, did she pity the one who was killing her? Shinobu froze. The taunt was a masterstroke. A poison aimed not at her body, but at her soul. Her serene mask cracked, revealing the seething, bottomless ocean of grief and hatred beneath. Her grip on her sword tightened, her knuckles white. The demon seized the opportunity, lunging forward, its needle-like claws aimed directly at her throat. It never reached her. Naruto was there, a blur of motion, his black gauntleted arm blocking the strike. The claws screeched against the metal. Get out of her head, Naruto growled, his eyes blazing. He kicked the demon away, sending it tumbling back. He stood in front of Shinobu, a solid, unshakable wall between her and the monster. He didn't look at her, keeping his focus on the enemy. Your anger is real, he said, his voice low and calm, meant only for her. Don't let a monster like that tell you what to do with it. Use it. Don't let it use you. His words cut through her rage-filled haze. He wasn't judging her. He wasn't telling her to calm down or to let go of her hatred. He was acknowledging it, validating it, and telling her to aim it. In that moment, something shifted inside her. The rage was still there, a burning coal in her soul, but it was no longer a wild, consuming fire. It was a forge. He needs his equipment to adapt and regenerate, she said, her voice regaining its cold, analytical edge. The large distillation coil to your left. It's the heart of his laboratory. If you can destroy it, I can end him. Naruto grinned. Now we're talking. He created a dozen clones. They erupted from puffs of smoke, a chaotic, swarming tide of orange and black that charged the demon from all sides. It was a classic Naruto Uzumaki diversion. The demon shrieked, lashing out, its attention completely consumed by the sudden onslaught. The real Naruto, shielded by the chaos, focused. The sun energy inside him coalesced in his palm, not as a sphere or a blade, but as a thin, hyper-compressed needle of pure, golden light. Meanwhile, Shinobu moved with an impossible, vengeful grace. Insect breathing, dance of the centipede, hundred-legged zigzag. Her speed was terrifying. She weaved through the clones, a zigzagging blur that confused the eye, and drove her blade deep into the demon's primary distillation coil. The glass and metal structure shattered, spraying the demon with its own half-formed poisons. The demon roared in agony and fury, its regeneration faltering. It turned, its blank face contorted in a mask of hate, and saw the real Naruto, his hand alight with a miniature sun. Sunlight needle, Naruto whispered. He thrust his hand forward. The needle of light shot across the cavern and pierced the demon square in the chest. There was no explosion, just a silent, intense burst of pure, golden energy. The demon's eyes, if it had them, would have widened in utter shock as its body, from the inside out, was utterly and completely unmade, turning to dust that was scattered by the cavern's drafts. The clones vanished. The silence that fell was absolute. They returned to the village and spent the rest of the night administering the antidote Shinobu had prepared. They worked side by side, a seamless team, moving from house to house. Their hands sure and steady. As the first rays of dawn crested the mountains, the last of the villagers had been treated, their breathing evening out, the color returning to their faces. They stood on a small hill overlooking Yakushi, the steam from the hot springs mingling with the morning mist. The village was alive, quiet, but alive. My sister, she was too kind, Shinobu said suddenly, her voice barely a whisper. She didn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the rising sun. She dreamed of a world where humans and even demons could understand each other. I thought it was a foolish, childish dream. Naruto thought of his own long, bloody path to understanding, of the final, desperate battle with Sasuke. It's not foolish, he said softly. It's just hard. The hardest thing in the world. Shinobu turned to him. Her smile was still there, but for the first time, it reached her eyes. The profound sadness was still there, but it was joined by something else, a flicker of warmth, a glimmer of shared understanding. Your methods are reckless, your logic is infuriating, and your optimism is clinically insane, she said, the corner of her mouth twitching in a way that was almost a genuine smile. But you saved me back there. Not just from the demon. Thank you. He just nodded, a simple gesture of acceptance. They had faced the poison together, the demons and their own, and had emerged into the light. Theirs was not a bond of cheerful affection or passionate fire. It was something quieter, deeper. It was a partnership forged in the crucible of shared pain, a dance of poison and sunlight that had found its perfect, deadly rhythm. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The coin toss and the unwavering will. The Butterfly Mansion's courtyard was Naruto's primary training ground, a place where he could unleash the raw power of his unique techniques without causing mass property damage. One afternoon, he was engaged in a complex sparring session with a dozen of his shadow clones. It was a dizzying display of tactics, each clone acting with independent malice, testing his speed and focus to their absolute limit. He was a whirlwind of black uniform and golden energy, his gaunt lights flashing as he blocked and countered strikes that only he could anticipate. Kanao Suyuri watched him from a sheltered veranda, her attention drawn by the sheer, chaotic energy he projected. She was sitting with her hands folded neatly in her lap, utterly still, a study in quiet perfection. When one of the clones used a particularly clever feint, a low sweep followed by a high overhead chop, Naruto shifted his weight, sidestepped the sweep, and met the chop with a swift, sun energy reinforced block that dispersed the clone in a cloud of smoke. Naruto, slightly winded, dismissed the remaining clones and walked towards the veranda. He grabbed a towel and sat down next to her, giving her a respectful amount of space. "You're good at spotting the patterns," he commented, wiping the sweat from his brow. You were tracking the real me the whole time, weren't you? Kanao gave him her gentle, distant smile, the one that revealed nothing of her inner thoughts. She didn't speak, merely looked at the clear afternoon sky. Naruto didn't press her. He knew from Shinobu that Kanao rarely spoke, relying instead on a small bronze coin to dictate her actions when she was forced to make a choice. It was a heartbreaking mechanism of self-erasure. Try this, he said, pulling a smooth, flat stone from the nearby decorative gravel. He held it out to her. Imagine this stone as a demon. You're on patrol, you see it. You can either take the quick, noisy route over the roof, or the slow, silent route through the drainage system. Which one do you take? Kanao's eyes flickered down to her lap. Her fingers instinctively sought the edge of her bronze coin. She pulled it out, her thumb poised to flip. Don't, Naruto said, his voice quiet but firm. He wasn't commanding her, he was creating a moment of clarity. Don't ask the coin, just look at the stone. Look at the roof, look at the drain. What does Kanao want to do? Her thumb paused, hovering over the metal. For the first time, Naruto saw a flicker of confusion that wasn't a mask, a small wrinkle in the placid water of her composure. She looked from the coin to the hypothetical roots in her mind, then back to his face. She searched his eyes, perhaps looking for the order. The command to choose, but found only quiet, unwavering expectation. He was looking at her as an equal, a master of her craft, and waiting for her decision. Finally, slowly, her hand lowered. The coin remained untossed, resting on her palm. The roof, she whispered, the sound of her voice faint and unused. The sound would travel, but it would be faster. It would cut the demon off before it reached the village path. Naruto's grin was genuine, a burst of sun-like pride. Good choice. You're fast enough to cover the sound. You knew the answer before you even touched the coin. Trust that, Kanao. It's what makes you a Hashira-level talent. He didn't push the conversation further. He had planted the seed. The call for the mission came that evening. Sugai Crow arrived with urgent news. A newly established demon outpost was discovered deep within the mountains, a subterranean fortress masked by an abandoned temple. It wasn't a mere feeding ground. It was a logistical hub, where a large number of abducted humans were being held, likely waiting to be transported to a major, centralized operation, a detail that aligned with Shinobu's previous concerns about the escalating organized threat. Shinobu herself gave the briefing, her smile tighter than usual. This mission requires absolute silence, Kanao, and the ability to strike with surgical precision, Naruto-kun. The intelligence is thin, and the location is too remote for a full Hashira assault without risking an ambush. You two are going in for reconnaissance, to secure intel on the scale of the threat. And to free any immediate captives. No large-scale engagement. Get in, get out. We will need to move quickly, Naruto said, looking at the topographical map. If it's a transport hub, the captives won't be there long. Kanao said nothing, but her eyes, fixed on the map, were narrowed in intense concentration. The mission felt personal to her. This was about people who had lost their voice and their choice. They moved under the cover of a moonless night, their ascent a masterful demonstration of stealth. Naruto used his shadow clones ahead of them, dispersing them the instant. They were spotted by patrolling low-level demons, using their momentary distraction to analyze patrol routes and sentry placements. Kanao was his silent guide, her superior eyesight and sense of smell. Honed by total concentration, breathing constant, allowing her to detect tripwires and pressure plates that even Naruto's advanced senses missed. They reached the abandoned temple complex. It was massive, the main building a silent, looming shadow. Kanao signaled a low sweep along the perimeter, her movements so fluid and economical that she seemed to melt into the shadows. Naruto followed, his BL.AC gauntlets helping him maintain grip on the slick, cold stone. They found the subterranean entrance beneath the temple's main altar. A complex locking mechanism, secured with thick metal chains and multiple wards, guarded the heavy stone trapdoor. Naruto knelt, his fingers deftly working on the lock, a skill learned during countless infiltration missions back home. Demons, Kanao whispered, her breath barely fogging the cold air. She pointed with her chin to a crack in the wall. Coming from the east tunnel. Less than a minute. Naruto looked at the lock. He needed another 30 seconds. I need you to run interference. He mouthed. Don't kill them. Just divert them. Lead them to the west corridor, then return. Kanao nodded. For a split second, her fingers twitched towards her obi, where her coin lay. But her hand stopped before it even reached the fabric. She looked at Naruto, a determined clarity in her lilac eyes, then she vanished. Naruto didn't need to see her work to know it was flawless. He heard a brief, muffled shriek, a sound of heavy impact, and then the sound of feet rushing away, confused and in pursuit of an enemy they couldn't see. Kanao had used her flower-breathing style not to kill, but to create a precise, painful disruption. 30 seconds later, the last tumbler clicked. He opened the trapdoor and saw her materialize from the shadows, her breath steady, her composure absolute. Ready, she whispered. They descended into the heart of the fortress. The air was dry and smelled of dust and fear. They moved through narrow tunnels, bypassing patrols and mapping the structure's layout. Naruto was the strategist, the one who planned the route and the escape. Kanao was the perfect executor, the silent executioner. They reached a large cavern. Dozens of humans were chained to the walls. Their faces gaunt with fear, but all alive. Their rescue would require a coordinated effort. More worryingly, in the center of the room, they saw the objective of their reconnaissance. Detailed maps showing multiple, similar hubs spread across the entire region, all converging on a single, massive point labeled only with a strange, stylized symbol. The escalating threat was real, organized, and far larger than they had first imagined. They needed to secure the maps, and they needed to free the captives. Clone for the maps, I'll deal with the lock, Naruto mouthed, pointing to a central control lever that operated the chains. Just as he was about to create a clone, a huge, brutish demon rounded the corner of the tunnel. It was Upper Moon 3 level in size and speed, though its chaotic movements suggested a lower rank that had been unnaturally empowered. It saw them instantly. Prey. It roared, a sound that shook the cavern walls. It lunged, a massive, armored fist swinging straight for Naruto's head. Naruto shoved Kanao behind a pillar, taking the blow on his forearm. The Sun Gauntlet took the brunt, but the force of the strike was immense, throwing him back against the wall. His head swam, and for a critical second, he was stunned. The demon turned its attention to Kanao, its eyes filled with maniacal hunger. A sweet, fragile thing. You'll be a delight. Kanao drew her Nichiren blade, the moonlight reflecting off the pink edge. The demon's raw strength was too much for a frontal assault, but her speed was unmatched. She could choose to draw it away, buying Naruto time to recover and strike, or she could make a desperate dash for the central lever to release the captives, sacrificing her safety for the mission. She brought her hand up, her fingers closing on the cool metal of her coin. This was the moment. Head for the door, or tails for the lever. She needed to choose. Her training screamed at her to leave it to chance, to avoid the burden of responsibility. Then, she remembered the training ground, the smooth stone, and the quiet expectation in Naruto's eyes. What does Kanao want to do? She looked at the lever. The mechanism was large and crude. It would take only a second to pull. She looked at the terrified, chained faces of the captives. The demon was closing fast. She dropped the coin. It hit the dusty stone floor with a faint tink and rolled away into the shadow of the pillar. She didn't look where it landed. Instead, she moved. Flower breathing, fifth form, peonies of futility. She launched herself not at the demon, but towards the lever. A blur of pink and black. The demon, confused by her choice, swung its fist, a clumsy, bone-shattering strike that tore through the space where she had been. Kanao reached the lever, her speed defying belief, and threw her weight against it. The chains securing the captives clanged open, and the people, jolted out of their stupor, began to scramble for their lives. With her objective secured, Kanao didn't flee. She turned and met the charging demon head-on, her expression one of focused, unwavering resolve. She was no longer waiting for permission from a coin. She was making her own path. She danced around the demon's massive form, her blade flashing, delivering shallow, precise cuts to its ankles and wrists, slowing it down. Naruto, fully recovered, saw the whole thing. He saw the coin fall, and he saw the choice. A profound surge of respect and admiration coursed through him. He was on his feet in a single bound. The gauntlets on his fists and feet blazed with a fierce, golden light. Over here, Ugly, he roared. He slammed a sun-reinforced fist into the side of the demon's ribcage. The sound was like a thunderclap, and the demon was hurled across the cavern, crashing into the rock face. It didn't dissolve, but the impact had shattered its unnaturally hard bone structure, leaving it stunned and vulnerable. Kanao didn't hesitate. She was already airborne, her blade whistling through the air in a final, graceful arc. Flower breathing, final form, equinoctial scarlet spider lily. It was a terrifying, all-or-nothing move that pushed her body to its limit. But her blade connected, severing the demon's head with a single, clean strike. They gathered the maps, helped the liberated captives find the exit, and made their escape into the pre-dawn darkness. They didn't speak until they were miles from the fortress, safely back in the dense forest, watching the first light of the sun pierce the canopy. Kanao sat down, her breathing heavy, and reached into her obi. She pulled out her coin, rubbing the smooth, cold metal between her fingers. She looked at it, then at the silent, expectant Naruto. "I didn't flip it," she said, her voice clear and stronger than he'd ever heard it. "I chose the lever. I chose to save them first." Naruto smiled, a gentle, genuine expression that held no trace of the warrior. "That was a good choice, Kanao." She didn't respond immediately. She just stared at the coin in her hand, the symbol of her lost will. Then, with a subtle, decisive movement, she closed her fingers around it. She tucked it back into her obi. But her fingers didn't linger on it. It was no longer a crutch. It was just a coin. In that quiet, sun-dappled morning, a new strength had been forged in Kanao's heart. And for Naruto, watching her make the choice to be her own person, the connection he felt was the deep, quiet bloom of a love built on respect and the profound privilege of watching a beautiful soul finally find its voice. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Shadow of Akaza. The news of Naruto's success in the subterranean fortress spread through the core like wildfire, cementing his reputation as a formidable, if unorthodox, powerhouse. The maps he and Kanao recovered were a chilling revelation, confirming the existence of a coordinated network far more sophisticated than they had ever imagined. It was in the mid-saint of this heightened tension that the next crisis struck. An entire train, traveling through the treacherous Sanzu Pass, had vanished without a trace. This was no ordinary train. It carried a vital shipment of scarlet crimson iron sand, the raw material for Nichiren blades, along with a dozen of the swordsmith village's most promising young apprentices. Its disappearance was a crippling blow to the corpse war effort, a strategic decapitation of their future weapon supply. The Hashira meeting was tense. An immediate, full-scale assault was proposed, but the region was a notorious demon den, a labyrinth of forests and ravines. A large force would be spotted miles away, walking directly into a potential slaughter. They needed a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. All eyes eventually fell on Naruto. A solo mission is too dangerous. Oyakata-sama, Shinobu protested, her usual composure strained with genuine concern. Even for him, Naruto-kun is the only one who can move fast enough to get in a ND out before a proper defense can be mounted, Kagaya Ubuyashiki said, his voice a gentle but unbreakable counterpoint to the room's anxiety. His abilities do not rely on a blade that can be broken, and his resilience is unmatched. He is not being sent to destroy an army. He is being sent to find what was lost. To be our eyes and ears. Kagaya turned his clouded gaze in Naruto's direction. The risk is great, but my children's lives are at stake. I am asking you to bring them home. Naruto simply dipped his head. I'll get it done. There was no bravado in his tone, just the quiet, unshakable certainty of a man who had made and kept impossible promises his entire life. He set out at dusk, a black-clad shadow against the setting sun. He ran, not on the roads, but through the treetops, a silent specter flowing through the branches. He covered in hours what would have taken a normal slayer a full day. The air grew colder as he climbed into the mountains, the scent of pine and cold stone sharp in his nostrils. He found the site of the attack just after midnight. It was a scene of awesome, terrifying power. The train tracks, thick lengths of solid steel, were not twisted or bent. They were sheared clean through. The edges of the metal smooth and almost polished. A massive section of the mountainside had been gouged out, and the train itself was gone. Naruto knelt, his fingers tracing the edge of the severed rail. This wasn't the work of a dozen lesser demons. This was the work of a single, immensely powerful entity. He closed his eyes, expanding his senses. There was no blood, no scent of a struggle. It was too clean. He followed the trail of destruction, a path of splintered trees and pulverized earth that led away from the tracks and deep into a secluded, bowl-shaped valley. There, he found the train. The cars had been ripped from the tracks and tossed about like discarded toys. They were dented and torn, but largely intact. He moved through the wreckage, his steps silent. The cargo car containing the ore was there, its doors wrenched open but the contents seemingly untouched. The passenger cars were empty. No bodies, no luggage, nothing. It was a ghost train. A sudden, overwhelming pressure descended on the valley. It was a suffocating wave of pure, condensed power, so potent it felt like the very air was turning to stone. It was a presence that dwarfed any demon he had yet encountered. A predator that had no need for stealth. A figure landed silently on top of the main engine car, his feet making no sound. He was bare-chested and powerfully built, his skin pale and covered in dark blue lines that resembled criminal tattoos. His hair was a shocking shade of pink, and his eyes, a piercing gold, had the kanji for upper 3 etched into them. He had a feral, wolfish grin on his face. A look of pure, unadulterated joy for battle. I was wondering who they would send, the demon said, his voice calm and resonant, yet carrying an undercurrent of savage intensity. I felt a new, powerful light among the Hashira. I had hoped for Kyojuro, but you are something else entirely. You have a magnificent fighting spirit. The fire inside you burns as bright as the sun itself. Naruto stood his ground, his body coiled with tension. He could feel it instantly. This being was on another level, parsecs beyond the poisoner, the illusionist, or the brute in the fortress. This was a true master. Where are the passengers? Naruto asked, his voice low and steady. The demon, Akaza, chuckled. The weak, they are safe. For now, they were merely the bait. I have no interest in eating them. Their flesh is bland, their spirits dim. I crave only the strong. I want to fight you. To test the limits of that power you hold. He tilted his head, his golden eyes glowing with fascination. Tell me your name, warrior. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto, Akaza repeated, savoring the sound. I am Akaza. I have a proposition for you, Naruto. That body, that spirit, it is a work of art. But it is fragile. It will age. It will weaken. It will die. Why let such perfection go to waste? Become a demon. Cast off the shackles of your mortality and you can hone your skills for all eternity. We could fight for 100 years, 1,000. Imagine the heights we could reach. The offer was delivered with a strange, fervent sincerity. Akaza truly believed he was offering a gift. I'll pass, Naruto said flatly. My strength comes from my desire to protect people, not to fight forever. It comes from the bonds I have. Something a monster like you would never understand. Akaza's smile widened, but the warmth vanished, replaced by a chilling predator's glee. Bonds, attachments, those are weaknesses, Naruto. They are chains that hold you to the ground. The truly strong stand alone. He dropped from the train car, landing in a low fighting stance. I will show you. I will shatter your body and your ideals. And in your dying moments, you will see the truth. Tech, HNIQUE development, destructive death, compass needle. A beautiful, intricate snowflake pattern deployed under Akaza's feet, glowing with a faint blue light. Now, he hissed, let the festival begin. He vanished. Naruto's senses screamed a warning, and he threw himself to the side an instant before the spot he'd been standing in exploded, pulverized by a punch that carried the force of a meteor. Akaza was already there, his fist retracting, a second strike aimed at Naruto's head. The speed was unbelievable. Naruto brought his sun gauntlet up to block. The impact was titanic. A shockwave erupted from the point of contact, tearing up the ground around them. Naruto was thrown back, his arm numb from the force, the metal of his gauntlet groaning in protest. This wasn't a fight, it was a hurricane. Akaza was relentless. Destructive death. Disorder. He unleashed a barrage of impossibly fast, air pressure punches, each one capable of leveling a building. Naruto was forced into a desperate dance of survival. Weaving and dodging, the air around him cracking and shattering with each missed blow. He couldn't even think about counter-attacking. Yes, This is it, Akaza roared, his laughter echoing through the valley. Your instincts are magnificent. You can feel my attacks. You can see them. Naruto knew he couldn't keep this up. He slapped his hands together. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 20 clones erupted into existence, swarming Akaza from all directions. Akaza's grin only widened. More targets. Wonderful. He flowed through them like water, his movements a symphony of destruction. Each punch and kick landed with perfect precision, turning the clones into puffs of smoke before they could even complete an attack. His compass needle technique was reading their intent, their fighting spirit, making every move predictable to him. But the clones weren't meant to land a hit. They were meant to create an opening. As Akaza destroyed the last clone, the real Naruto was upon him, his fist blazing with golden sun energy. He aimed a straight punch at Akaza's chest. Akaza's eyes widened slightly. He couldn't fully dodge in time, but he twisted, letting the punch graze his side instead of landing squarely. The moment the sun energy made contact, there was a sound like searing meat. Akaza hissed in pain and surprise, leaping back, a deep, smoking gouge in his ribs. Black smoke poured from the wound, but it was regenerating far slower than it should. This power, Akaza breathed, looking at his wound with fascination rather than fear. It burns like the sun. How do you wield the sun itself? It's magnificent. His excitement reached a fever pitch. You are truly the one I have been waiting for. Naruto didn't give him time to recover. He pressed the attack, his gauntlets and greaves now fully aglow. The fight became a blur of gold and blue, a chaotic storm of light and force. Naruto was finally able to land hits, his unconventional, shinobi-style taijutsu a difficult pattern for Akaza's compass to fully predict. But for every blow Naruto landed, Akaza landed too, his martial arts perfected over centuries of battle. Naruto was being worn down. His ribs were cracked, his shoulder was likely dislocated. And he could feel his own energy reserves beginning to strain. He was faster, arguably stronger in raw power, but Akaza's skill and his ability to read attacks were a near-perfect counter. He needed to end this. One big attack. He created a single clone, ordering it to run interference. As the clone engaged Akaza in a suicidal dance, Naruto leapt back, landing atop a wrecked train car. He brought his hands together, pouring a massive amount of his altered chakra into his palm. He wasn't just molding it, he was compressing it, forcing the solar energy to condense, to fold in on itself. It didn't swirl like a normal Rasengan. It contracted, pulling the very light from the air, forming a sphere the size of his fist that burned with the intensity of a collapsing star. It was terrifyingly unstable, and it was draining him at an alarming rate. He called it the sun-forged Rasengan. Akaza dispatched the clone with a final, contemptuous chop. He looked up at Naruto, and for the first time, a flicker of genuine caution appeared in his eyes. His compass needle was screaming at him, a cacophony of warning bells telling him that the ball of light in Naruto's hand was absolute death. Marvelous! Akaza roared, his battle lust overcoming his caution. Show me that glorious technique. Destructive death. Annihilation type. He launched himself at Naruto, becoming a living projectile, his fists a blur as he unleashed his strongest, most devastating attack, a relentless, straight-line onslaught of hundreds of punches designed to obliterate anything in its path. Naruto pushed off the train car, meeting him head-on. Sun-forged Rasengan. The miniature sun met the storm of fists. The resulting explosion was utterly silent for one terrifying second. Then, a wave of golden light and pure concussive force erupted outwards, vaporizing the train car, scouring the earth, and turning a 100-meter swath of the forest into splintered toothpicks. Naruto was thrown through the air, his body battered and broken, his arm a mess of torn flesh and burnt sinew. He slammed into the far wall of the valley and collapsed, his vision fading. Through the haze of smoke and dust, he saw Akaza. The upper moon was in a sorry state. His arms were gone, disintegrated up to the elbows, and a massive, gaping hole smoldered in his chest. But he was already regenerating. New limbs sprouting from the stumps, his flesh knitting itself back together with terrifying speed. He was laughing, a ragged, breathless sound of pure ecstasy. Incredible, truly incredible, Naruto. He gasped, his voice hoarse, but then he stopped. He sniffed the air, and a look of utter frustration and hatred crossed his face. He looked to the east, where the jagged peaks of T. He mountains were just beginning to be outlined by the pale, gray light of approaching dawn. Not yet. Damn it, not yet. He snarled. He looked back at the collapsed form of Naruto, a look of profound regret and burning promise in his golden eyes. This is not over. I will find you again. Next time, we will fight until one of us is dust. Remember my name, Naruto Uzumaki. I am Akaza. I am the 1W. Ho will push you to the pinnacle of your strength. With one last, longing look at his worthy adversary, Akaza turned and vanished into the shadows, a fleeting specter escaping the coming day. Naruto lay in the cratered, smoking remains of the valley, his consciousness flickering. His last thought before the darkness took him was of the apprentices. He had to save them. When the first rescue team of Kikuchi arrived hours later, they found him unconscious in the center of a scene of unbelievable destruction. And huddled together in a nearby cave, scared but completely unharmed, were all the MISSING swordsmiths and their precious cargo, right where Akaza had left them. The news that a single man had fought an upper moon to a standstill and survived sent a shockwave of disbelief and awe through the entire Demon Slayer corps. Naruto had become more than just an asset. He had become a legend. But he had also gained the obsessive attention of a monster, forging a rivalry that would be paid for in blood and sunlight. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Hashira's Gambit and the Fox's Vow. Healing was a strange, accelerated affair. Back in his world, a battle like the one against Akaza would have put him in the hospital for weeks. Even with Kurama's chakra, here, his own sun-forged energy worked with a relentless, quiet efficiency, knitting torn muscle and mending cracked bone at a rate that left the Butterfly Mansion's staff in a state of clinical awe. His most grievous wound, the arm that had wielded the sun-forged Rasengan, was still wrapped in thick bandages, but the searing pain had dulled to a persistent ache. Shinobu was a constant presence at his bedside. She'd come in under the guise of changing his dressings or administering herbal poultices, but her violet eyes held a new, unguarded concern. The professional mask was still there, but it was thinner now, more fragile. Your cellular regeneration is illogical, she stated one afternoon, her delicate fingers expertly re-wrapping his arm. By all accounts, your entire muscular and nervous systems should have been incinerated. Yet, here you are, nearly whole. You continue to be the most fascinating and infuriating medical anomaly I have ever encountered. Just stubborn, I guess, Naruto grunted as she tightened a bandage. Stubbornness is not a recognized biological healing agent, she retorted, but there was no bite in her words. She paused, her hand stilling on his arm. I saw the report from the Kikuchi. The valley, it looked as though a small meteor had struck. They said they could feel the heat radiating from the ground hours later. She finally looked up, her gaze meeting his. You should be dead. He was strong, Naruto said, the memory of Akaza's joyful, savage grin flashing in his mind. Stronger than anyone I've met here. But he got careless when the sun came up. Don't, she said, her voice suddenly sharp, losing its melodic quality. Don't dismiss what you did. You faced an upper moon, one of the original 6, and you survived. You saved everyone. Do not treat that as a matter of luck. Her composure cracked for a moment, revealing the raw fear she must have felt when she heard the news. She quickly reined it in, clearing her throat and returning to her work. Oyakata-sama has requested your presence. A full Hashira meeting has been convened at the main estate. It is about you. Naruto's jaw tightened. He knew this was coming. He was a foreign object in their system, an unpredictable variable with devastating power. His clash with Akaza had forced their hand. They could no longer just observe him. They had to decide what he was, a weapon or a threat. He was escorted to the Ubuyashiki estate by 2 silent Kikuchi. As he stepped into the familiar, sun-drenched gravel courtyard, he felt the weight of 9 pairs of eyes land on him. The Hashira were all there, kneeling in a neat line before the veranda where Kagaya Ubuyashiki sat, his children beside him. The air was thick with tension. A palpable static of suspicion, curiosity, and outright hostility. He saw Mitsuri, who gave him a small, worried smile that she tried to hide behind her sleeve. He saw Shinobu, who had taken her place and resumed her mask of perfect serenity. And he saw the hard, scarred face of the Wind Hashira, Sanemi Shinazugawa, whose eyes burned with a furious, undisguised contempt. So this is the anomaly, Sanemi sneered. His voice a low, gravelly rasp. The one who smells of strange power and fights like a cornered animal. Fought an upper moon, they say. I say he got lucky. Or maybe EY recognized one of their own and let him live. That is enough, Sanemi, Kagaya said, his voice gentle but carrying an authority that instantly silenced the Wind Hashira. He turned his scarred face towards Naruto. Naruto Uzumaki, you have rendered the Demon Slayer Corps a great service. You have saved the lives of my children and protected our future. You have my deepest gratitude. Naruto walked forward and knelt. Not in supplication, but in respect for the man's evident grace and leadership. They were in trouble. I helped. It's what I do. How very noble. The serpent Hashira, Obanai Iguro, hissed from his perch in a nearby tree, his snake, Kaburamaru, flicking its tongue. But it does not answer the question. What are you? Your power is not breathing. It is not demonic. It is nothing this world has ever seen. For all we know, you are a new breed of demon, a spy sent by Kibutsuji himself. He is not a spy. Mitsuri burst out, unable to stay silent. He's kind and strong. He fought beside me. He saved me. Your heart is easily swayed, Mitsuri, Obanai countered coolly. That does not make it a reliable judge of character. Let's not be hasty, the sound Hashira, Tengen Uzui, boomed, striking a pose. The boy has flamboyant survival skills. And he took out a demon fortress. That's a flair for the dramatic I can appreciate. The stone Hashira, Gyome Himahima, the largest of their number, clasped his hands together, tears streaming from his blind eyes. I can feel the spirit within him. It is turbulent, powerful, but it is not evil. It is a soul that has known great pain. Ah, what a pitiful child. I agree with Tengen. The flame Hashira, Kyojuro Rengoku, declared, his voice full of confident cheer. His actions speak for themselves. He set his heart ablaze and faced an enemy of unimaginable power. That is the mark of a true warrior. The debate swirled around him, a clash of powerful personalities and deeply held convictions. Naruto remained silent, letting them speak. He needed to understand the battlefield before he made his move. The main opposition was clear. Sanemi and Obanai, fueled by suspicion and a rigid adherence to the known rules of their world. His allies were equally clear. Mitsuri, Rengoku, and Tengen, who judged him on his spirit and his results. Shinobu, Gyome, and the others were the undecided center, their opinions holding the balance of power. Finally, Sanemi had enough. He stood up, his hand on the hilt of his jagged green katana. Words are meaningless. I'll see for myself. He strode towards Naruto, his aura a storm of barely contained violence. If you're not a demon, you won't have any problem with this. In a flash, he drew his blade and sliced it across his own arm, the crimson blood welling up instantly. The scent of Mareki blood, intoxicating to demons, filled the air. He thrust his bleeding arm in front of Naruto's face. Go on, have a drink, show us your true nature. The courtyard fell silent. All eyes were on Naruto. Mitsuri let out a small gasp of horror. Naruto didn't flinch. He didn't recoil. He simply looked up at Sanemi, his blue eyes as calm and deep as the sea. He met the Wind Hashira's furious gaze and held it. He could smell the blood, of course. It was thick, coppery, and nothing more. It was just blood. It held no allure, sparked no hunger. Slowly, deliberately, Naruto raised his hands and made a single hand sign, the sign for reconciliation. It was an old shinobi gesture, one that signified a desire to end conflict without further bloodshed. Your blood is your own, Wind Hashira, Naruto said, his voice calm and clear, cutting through the tension. I have no desire for it. I am not your enemy. His absolute lack of reaction, his refusal to be baited, was more disarming than any display of power would have been. Sanemi looked genuinely taken aback, his rage momentarily short-circuited by confusion. Naruto stood up, facing the assembled Hashira. He was no longer a supplicant. He was an equal. You want to know what I am? He said, his voice ringing with a quiet power that commanded their attention. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I come from a land very far from here, a land that has its own wars. Its own monsters. I lost that home. I lost everyone in it. He let the weight of that statement settle. He saw a flicker of empathy in even Obanai's guarded eyes. I don't know how I got here. All I know is that when I woke up, I found a world full of people who were being hunted in the dark. I saw fear, and I saw people like you fighting to protect the innocent. My war is over, but yours is not, and I will not stand by and do nothing while people are suffering. He looked from face to face, meeting each Hashira's gaze. I don't ask you to trust me. Trust is earned, not given. I will earn it on the battlefield, by your side. I will earn it by protecting your comrades and killing your enemies. I have this power. He held up his bandaged hand, and I will use it to help you see the next sunrise. That is my promise, my ninja way. There was no artifice in his words. Just the simple, unvarnished truth of a man who had been forged in the crucible of war and had emerged with his core convictions intact. The courtyard was silent for a long moment, the Hashira absorbing his declaration. It was Kaguya who finally broke the silence. His gentle smile was full of a profound wisdom. We have spent a century fighting in the dark, my children. We have followed the same paths, honed the same techniques, and we are locked in a bloody stalemate. The arrival of Naruto Uzumaki is not a crisis. It is a sign. The winds of fate are changing. A new sun is rising on our long night. He turned his gaze to Naruto. We accept your vow, Naruto Uzumaki. We accept your aid. Your power is unique, a pillar of strength unlike any other. From this day forward, you will be known as the Taiyo Bashira, the sun pillar of the Demon Slayer Corps. The declaration was final. Sanemi gritted his teeth but bowed his head in deference to his master's will. The gambit was over. The verdict was in. The meeting was dismissed. As the Hashira began to disperse, Naruto felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. The political battle had been almost as draining as the physical one. Naruto-kun. A soft weight crashed into his back, and he found himself in a tight embrace from Mitsuri. She was trembling. I was so scared. I thought they were going to. She couldn't finish the sentence. She just held on tighter. But you were so wonderful. So brave. When you stood up to Shinazugawa-san, my heart went doki doki, so fast I thought it was going to burst. She pulled back, her face flushed, tears of relief streaming from her eyes. I love how strong you are, but I love how kind you are even more. I love you, Naruto-kun. The confession tumbled out of her, a pure, unfiltered torrent of emotion. Before Naruto could even process it, another voice, quiet and controlled, spoke from beside him. She is correct. Your recklessness is infuriating, but your resolve is admirable. Shinobu stood there, her hands clasped in front of her. Her smile was gone. In its place was an expression of raw vulnerability that was more beautiful than any smile could ever be. For a long time, I have lived only for vengeance. The future was a luxury I could not afford to consider. But when I thought of them casting you out, of you facing Akaza again, alone, I found the thought unacceptable. She took a small, hesitant step closer. You have made me want to see a tomorrow where the fighting is over. I wish to see it with you. As if on cue, a third figure appeared at his other side. Kanao was silent, as usual, but her presence was a statement in itself. She looked up at him, her lilac eyes clear and full of a feeling she was only just learning to name. She reached out and her fingers gently brushed against his bandaged hand. Where you go, she said, her voice a soft but steady whisper. I want to be there. Too. This is my choice. The three most powerful women he had met in this world stood before him, their hearts laid bare. For a moment, Naruto was speechless. As old life had been so focused on chasing a single, wayward bond that he had never truly considered a future like this. A future filled with so much light. He looked at Mitsuri's passionate heart, Shinobu's resilient soul, and Kanao's blossoming will. He thought of the void Akaza had spoken of, the loneliness of ultimate strength. And he looked at the three women before him and knew the demon was a fool. This was strength. This connection. This was something worth fighting and dying for. He gently took Mitsuri's hand, met Shinobu's gaze, and gave Kanao's fingers a reassuring squeeze. I'm not a hero from a story, he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't name. I'm just a guy who's been lucky. Lucky to have survived. Lucky to have met all of you. He looked at them, his gaze encompassing all three. A shinobi's promise is absolute. I'm not going anywhere. I vow to protect you, to fight for you, and to build a life with you, right here. No matter what darkness comes, I'll be your son. It was more than an acceptance. It was a covenant, a vow made by the new sun pillar, witnessed by the setting sun. In a courtyard that had so recently been a field of judgment, a new family was forged. A bond of 3 brilliant moons orbiting a single, unwavering sun, ready to face the long night together. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Sun-Forged Alliance. The weeks following Naruto's official recognition as the Sun Pillar were a strange and welcome peace. The threat of the demon network loomed, a dark cloud on the horizon, but in the eye of the coming storm, a new life began to take root. The 4 of them, Naruto, Mitsuri, Shinobu, and Kanao, found a rhythm, a domesticity that was a quiet act of defiance against the world they inhabited. Their mornings often started in the main training dojo. It was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Mitsuri's whip-like blade would fill the air with a sound like tearing silk as she practiced her forms, her movements a dizzying blend of acrobatics and raw power. Beside her, Kanao was a silent blur, her footwork so precise she barely seemed to disturb the air, each strike of her blade a lesson in perfect economy. Naruto's training was the anchor, the gravitational center of the room. He would spar with his clones, the percussive thud of his sun gauntlets echoing off the walls. But now, his partners were no longer just extensions of himself. Shinobu, with her blinding speed, would dance between him and his clones, her practice blade tapping at vital points he hadn't even realized were exposed. Kanao would sometimes join in, her in hand, CED vision allowing her to see the subtle tells that preceded his attacks, forcing him to be faster, more unpredictable. Mitsuri, with her overwhelming strength, was his perfect sparring partner for raw power. Their exchanges sending shockwaves through the dojo floor. One morning, after a particularly intense session, the 4 of them sat on the veranda, sharing a breakfast of rice balls and tea. Mitsuri was happily devouring her 5th rice ball, her cheeks puffed out like a squirrel's. "Shinobu-chan, you're so fast," she exclaimed after a large gulp. "It's like you're not even there," and then suddenly, whoosh. "You're right behind him. It's amazing. Speed is useless without precision," Shinobu replied, taking a delicate sip of her tea. She gave Naruto a pointed look. "Something our sun pillar could stand to remember. You still leave your left side exposed for a fraction of a second when you pivot for a high kick." "Hey, that's because Kanao was coming at me from the right," Naruto protested, pointing his rice ball at the quiet girl beside him. "Her timing is perfect. It's scary." Kanao's cheeks colored with a faint blush at the praise. She looked down, but a small, genuine smile touched her lips. "I saw an opening," she said softly. This was their new normal. A dance of gentle teasing, mutual respect, and an unspoken, fiercely protective affection. They were no longer just individuals fighting a common cause. They were a single, cohesive unit, their strengths and weaknesses slotting together like a masterwork puzzle. Naruto's raw power was tempered by Shinobu's strategic mind. Mitsuri's passionate ferocity was balanced by Kanao's quiet focus. They were learning each other's rhythms, anticipating each other's moves, not just in battle, but in the quiet moments in between. Their peace was shattered by the urgent caw of Kagaya's personal Kasugai crow, a magnificent bird with feathers like polished obsidian. It landed in the center of their breakfast, its message Sta. RK and immediate. Emergency Hashira meeting. The time has come. Move now. The atmosphere at the Ubuyashiki estate was electric with grim purpose. The maps recovered from the fortress had been analyzed, cross-referenced with decades of intelligence. A pattern had emerged, a spiderweb of logistics and supply lines converging on a single point. An old, abandoned silver mine on the slopes of Mount Yake, a place long rumored to be haunted. "This is it," Kagaya said, his voice resonating with a quiet finality. "This is their command center. Their primary forward operating base. The scale of it is unprecedented. We believe a significant number of demons are garrisoned there, led by an unknown but highly intelligent commander. Then we hit them with everything we've got," Tsunemi snarled, his hand already gripping his sword. "A full Hashira assault. We'll burn them out from the inside." "That is what they would expect," Shinobu countered, her voice cutting through his aggressive fervor. "The terrain is treacherous, and the entrance is a bottleneck. They would slaughter us before we even reached the main chambers. A frontal assault is suicide. Shinobu is right, Naruto added, his eyes fixed on the map. This isn't a nest, it's a fortress. It needs to be treated like one. We don't need a sledgehammer. We need a key. He pointed to a section of the map detailing old, forgotten ventilation shafts. Far from the main entrance. A small, fast strike team goes in through here. We move to the heart of their command, decapitate the leadership, and create chaos from the inside. That will be the signal for the main force, led by the other Hashira, to attack the main entrance. We disorient them, break their command structure, and then crush them in the pincer. It was a classic shinobi infiltration strategy. Bold, risky, and utterly unexpected. A flicker of a smile touched Kagaya's lips. A brilliant plan, Sun Pillar. Who would you have on this strike team? Naruto didn't hesitate. He looked at the three women who had traveled with him to the estate. The team is already here. There were no arguments. The synergy between the four of them was already legendary. They were the Sun-forged alliance. A spearhead perfectly suited for the task. That night, under a sky thick with clouds, the assault began. While the main force of Hashira and Slayers moved towards the mine's main entrance, creating a diversionary ruckus. The four of them scaled the sheer, icy cliffs of Mount Yake. Kanao led the way, her eyes piercing the darkness, spotting handholds and loose rocks that would haw. They sent anyone else plummeting to their deaths. They found the ventilation shaft, a dark, narrow fissure reeking of sulfur and something cold and dead. Naruto took point, the faint golden light from H's gauntlets illuminating the oppressive darkness. They moved through the tight, claustrophobic tunnels for what felt like an eternity, the only sound their own steady breathing. Finally, they reached a grate. Below them lay the heart of the fortress. It was a vast, multi-leveled cavern, its darkness pushed back by the eerie blue-white glow of phosphorescent moss. And it was a scene of terrifying order. Demons, dozens of them, moved with the disciplined precision of soldiers. They weren't snarling, fighting amongst themselves, or feasting. They were sharpening weapons, hauling supplies, and standing guard in neat formations. It was a military encampment. This is wrong, Mitsuri whispered, her eyes wide. Demons don't act like this. Their leader has imposed his will upon them, Shinobu murmured, her analytical gaze taking in every detail. Fascinating, and terrifying. Naruto pointed towards a raised dais on the far side of the cavern. A single figure stood there, staring at a massive map carved into the rock wall. He was tall and lean, and even from this distance, he carried himself with an air of aristocratic authority. He wore a modified version of the Demon Slayer uniform, He kanji for destroy, on its back now dyed a deep, blood red. There's our target, Naruto whispered. We move on my signal. Their descent was silent poetry. Kanao dropped first, landing on a narrow ledge without a sound. Shinobu followed, a feather on the wind. Mitsuri, with her incredible flexibility, used the rock face to somersault down. Naruto landed last, a solid, reassuring thud. They ed through the shadows of the massive support pillars, a four-person phantom. They were almost to the dais when a low-level demon, its senses sharper than the others, turned its head, sniffing the air. Before it could raise the alarm, Kanao's blade was at its throat. A single, silent slice, and it dissolved into ash. But it was too late. The figure on the dais had turned. He didn't look surprised. He looked expectant. He had a handsome, angular face, with sharp, intelligent eyes and short, dark hair. He smiled, a thin, humorless expression. The Sun Pillar, he said, his voice calm and cultured. It carried across the cavern without him needing to raise it. And his lovely attendants. The Love Hashira, the Insect Hashira, and the Subuko. I am honored. I was beginning to think you wouldn't find my humble little outpost. The other demons in the cavern turned, their eyes glowing in the dark. But they didn't attack. They held their positions, waiting for the command. Who are you? Naruto demanded, stepping forward, positioning himself in front of the others. The man bowed slightly, a gesture of mocking courtesy. My name is Kageyama. I was once the Shadow Hashira of the Demon Slayer Corps. A title that, I must admit, I always found rather fitting. The revelation hit them like a physical blow. A former Hashira, the ultimate betrayal. You were one of us, Mitsuri gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. How could you? Quote, because I saw the truth, Kageyama said, his voice taking on a fervent, pedagogical tone. I spent 30 years fighting in the mud, watching brilliant warriors die for a populace too weak and ignorant to even know they were being protected. I watched us trade the lives of our best and brightest for a few more years of a flawed, chaotic peace. It is a fool's bargain. He gestured around the cavern. This is the alternative. Order. Discipline. A society where the strong rule and protect the weak. Not as equals, but as a shepherd protects his flock. Muzan Kibutsuji is a force of nature. A necessary catalyst. But his vision is limited to his own survival. My vision is for a new world. A perfect world, ruled by a new, enlightened aristocracy of the powerful. You're insane, Shinobu hissed, her hand tightening on her sword. Am I? Kageyama's eyes landed on Naruto. Look at you, Sun Pillar. You possess a power that dwarfs any Hashira. A power that could reshape the world. Yet you squander it defending the very weakness that holds humanity back. You are a king trying to live as a common soldier. Join me. Together, we could burn away the rot and build a true, lasting order. The only thing I'm burning, Naruto growled, his gauntlets beginning to glow, is you. Kageyama sighed dramatically. A pity. I had hoped you would be more intelligent. He raised a single, elegant hand. Destroy them. The disciplined demons attacked, a wave of claws and fangs. But this was a battle the Alliance was born for. Mitsuri, left flank, crowd control, Naruto yelled. On it, she chirped. And then she was a pink whirlwind, her blade a flowing, unpredictable ribbon of steel that scythed through a dozen demons at once. Love breathing, third form, lovely kitty shower. Kanao, right flank, target the larger ones, go for the legs. Kanao nodded, her expression fiercely focused. She became a phantom, her blade a flashing silver arc that hamstrung the larger, brutish demons, bringing them crashing to the ground. Flower breathing, second form, honorable shadow plum. Shinobu, with me, we take the commander. Shinobu was already moving, her speed a terrifying blur. Insect breathing, dance of the dragonfly, compound eye hexagon. She unleashed a furious six-strike thrust, aiming for Kageyama's vital points. Kageyama simply smiled. He drew Hi's own Nichiren blade, a jet-black katana that seemed to drink the light, and met her attack. But he didn't use a breathing style. He moved with a cold, demonic speed, his blade infused with a dark energy. Blood demon art. Shadow weave. Tendrils of solid shadow erupted from his blade, deflecting Shinobu's stingers and wrapping around her sword, trying to wrench it from her grasp. At the same time, Naruto charged. His fist a miniature sun. Kageyama met his charge with a palm strike, a wave of pure, negative energy flowing from his hand that clashed with Naruto's sun energy, creating a shockwave that threw them both back. This was no ordinary demon. He was a Hashira's skill and intellect combined with a demon's power and regeneration. He knew their techniques, their strategies, their weaknesses. The battle in the cavern was a maelstrom of light and shadow. Naruto and Shinobu fought Kageyama in a desperate, high-speed duel, while Mitsuri and Kanao held back the tide of his disciplined army. But they were outnumbered, and their leader was an opponent on a whole new level. A loud explosion rocked the cavern entrance. The main force had begun their assault. Kageyama clicked his tongue in annoyance. It seems our time is at an end. This has been a most enlightening field test. He parried a blow from Naruto and kicked Shinobu back. I have the data I require. It is time to relocate. He made a series of complex hand signs. And the shadows in the cavern deepened, coalescing around him and his remaining demons. Farewell, pillars. Tell Ubuyashiki that the age of shadows has just begun. You're not getting away, Naruto roared. He poured all his energy into one final, desperate attack, a sun-forged Rasengan aimed at the coalescing darkness. The sphere of light slammed into the shadows, and there was a massive explosion. When the light faded, Kageyama and his elite guard were gone. They had dealt a blow, taking out dozens of his soldiers and forcing a retreat, but the head of the snake had escaped. The four of them stood in the now silent cavern, bruised, bleeding, and breathing heavily as the rest of the demon slayers began to pour in. They hadn't won a total victory, but they had survived, and they had stared into the face of a new kind of enemy. Not a monster driven by hunger, but a fallen hero driven by a twisted ideal. Naruto looked at Shinobu, Mitsuri, and Kanao, who gathered around him. Their faces grim but resolute. They had fought as one, a single, living weapon. The alliance had been forged. And they all knew, with a chilling certainty, that this was only the first battle in a much longer, darker war. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. Echoes of a Demon God. The victory at Mount Yake was a hollow one. They had scattered Kageyama's forces, but the man himself, the twisted root of the problem, had vanished like smoke. The captured maps and documents were a puzzle box of horrifying implications, revealing a network of agents and supply lines that had been operating under the corpse nose for years. The Hashira were in a state of high alert, a grim, focused energy replacing the shock of Kageyama's betrayal. In the heart of the Ubuyashiki Library, a place rarely seen by active slayers, Naruto and Shinobu stood before a man who seemed as ancient as the scrolls surrounding him. Master Tatsu was a former Hashira of a bygone era, his body now frail and confined to a wheeled chair. But his mind remained a razor-sharp repository of the corpse's deepest and darkest lore. Kageyama was always ambitious, Tatsu rasped, his thin, papery fingers tracing the symbols from Kageyama's map, which they had copied onto a fresh scroll. He saw the world in shades of strength and weakness. But this, he tapped a recurring, complex symbol, the one that marked the convergence point of the entire network. This is not a symbol of military conquest. This is a summoning sigil. An invocation. An invocation for what? Shinobu asked, her voice hushed with a reverence she reserved for very few. A story, Master Tatsu said, his clouded eyes looking at something far beyond the library walls. A legend the core has tried to bury for a millennium. Before Muzan Kibutsuji, there was a source. A primordial entity of pure, negative energy. It did not hunger as demons do. It simply was anathema to life, to the sun. The legends call it the Oni no Kami, the demon god. Naruto felt a cold dread that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. The name resonated with a deep, primal wrongness. According to the oldest texts, this entity has been in a state of slumber, a near-death hibernation, for eons. Tatsu continued. Muzan is but a splinter of its power, a cancerous cell that broke off and gained its own twisted sentience. The texts prophesied that the demon god could only be stirred from its slumber by an immense infusion of energy. Either a catastrophic loss of life, or the arrival of a power that directly opposed its nature. A power as potent and absolute as the sun itself. The old master's gaze fell upon Naruto, and the implication was a physical weight. My arrival here, it's waking it up, Naruto said, the words tasting like ash. That's why the demons are getting stronger. They're feeling its influence. Kageyama is not just building an army, Shinobu concluded, her brilliant mind connecting the pieces. He is a cultist. He believes he can control this god. He is gathering power, resources, and human lives, not for a war, but for a ritual. An offering. The sheer, apocalyptic scale of Kageyama's ambition settled over them, a suffocating shroud. He wasn't just a traitor. He was a doomsday prophet, actively trying to unleash a world-ending catastrophe. The relative peace of the butterfly mansion had become a fragile, precious thing. A sanctuary they all guarded fiercely. It was a place where the horrors of the night were held at bay by medicine, rigorous training, and the simple, defiant act of living. It was this peace that Kageyama chose to shatter. It happened on a night when the moon was a sliver of bone in a black sky. A sudden, violent tremor shook the mansion to its foundations. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a singular, focused impact. Naruto, Mitsuri, Shinobu, and Kanao were in the courtyard in an instant, their instincts screaming. A massive hole had been blown in the wisteria-lined outer wall, the demon R. Appalling flowers torn and scattered like confetti. In the center of the breach stood a demon, but it was unlike any they had seen. It was a hulking, multi-limbed creature that seemed to be made of shifting, liquid shadow. Its form constantly rippling. It exuded an aura of pure, mindless destruction. A diversion, Naruto snarled, his eyes scanning the darkness. He's here. As the four of them moved to engage the shadow brute, a second, far more subtle attack was already over. From the other side of the estate, a scream was cut brutally short. It was a voice they all knew. They left the brute to a team of subordinate slayers and raced through the mansion. They found the infirmary in shambles. Medical cabinets were overturned, beds were thrown aside. 3 young helpers, the Sumi, Hyo, and Naho trio, were huddled in a corner, weeping in terror. And Aoi Kanzaki was gone. On the floor, drawn in a substance that looked disturbingly like dried blood, was Kageyama's sigil. It wasn't a message. It was a brand, a mark of ownership. He had violated their home, their sanctuary, and taken one of their own from under their very noses. Shinobu's composure broke. A low, guttural sound of pure rage escaped her throat. Aoi was more than her assistant. She was the bedrock of the mansion, the stern, capable heart that kept the entire operation running. She was family. Kanao stood frozen, her face a mask of pale shock, her hands trembling. Naruto placed a hand on Shinobu's shoulder, his own fury a tightly controlled inferno. We'll get her back. 2 days passed in a haze of frantic, fruitless searching. Then, the message came. A single, terrified Kasugai crow, its feathers ruffled and one leg broken, landed weakly on the veranda. Tied to its other leg was a strip of Aoi's familiar blue and white checkered apron. And a note. It was in Kageyama's elegant, precise script. It named a location, an abandoned wisteria house deep in the woods, a place that was once a sanctuary for traveling slayers. And it gave a time, midnight. The following day, come and reclaim what is yours, it read. If you can. It was a trap, a blatant, arrogant, undisguised trap. And they had no choice but to spring it. The wisteria house was a perversion of what it was meant to be. The beautiful, drooping flowers that surrounded it were dead, their purple blossoms turned black and brittle, their protective scent replaced by a charnel house stench. The house itself stood dark and silent under the full moon. The 4 of them approached, their movements synchronized, their senses on a razor's edge. The front doors creaked open as they drew near, an invitation into the maw of the beast. They found her in the main hall. Aoi was standing in the center of the room, her back to them. She was wearing her usual uniform and apron. For a heart-stopping moment, they thought she was unharmed. Aoi-san, Shinobu called out, her voice trembling with a desperate hope. Aoi turned around, and they saw the horror. Her skin was pale, veined with thin black lines. Her eyes, once a stern and determined blue, were now a horrifying, luminous crimson, the sclera black as pitch. And on her sharp, intelligent face was a serene, empty smile that was a terrifying mockery of Kanao's old blankness. She was a demon. Kocho-sama, she said, her voice a melodic, distorted echo of her own. You came. Kageyama-sama said you would. He is a very clever man. What did he do to you? Mitsuri whispered, tears welling in her eyes. He opened my eyes, Demon Aoi replied, tilting her head. He showed me the futility of it all. Mending broken bodies only so they can be broken again. It's an endless, pointless cycle. But this is permanence. This is strength. She held up a hand, and her fingers elongated into sharp, needle-like claws. Identical to the ones the poisoner demon had wielded. Blood demon art. Sterile field. The air around them grew thick and heavy, shimmering with a barely visible haze. Naruto felt his own energy begin to feel sluggish. Suppressed. My blood art nullifies all foreign energy within its field, Aoi explained calmly. Your precious sun power, your breathing techniques, they will weaken, slow, and eventually fail. Kageyama-sama designed it specifically for you. He gathered so much useful data at the mine. This was the true nature of Kageyama's cruelty. He hadn't just turned Aoi into a monster. He had turned her into their perfect counter, using her own memories and her knowledge of them as a weapon. Aoi, fight it, Kanao cried out, her voice cracking, finding her own voice only to have it stolen by grief. This isn't you. Oh, but it is, Aoi said, her smile widening. It's the me that was tired of being weak. The me that was tired of watching you all go off to fight Hylia was left behind to clean up the blood. Her gaze, full of a cold, alien venom, settled on Shinobu. Especially you, master, always pushing yourself, always smiling through the pain. But I know your secret. I know you keep a weaker, slower acting version of your wisteria poison in your own body, a final, suicidal trap for an upper moon. So noble, so pathetic. The psychological blow was as devastating as any physical attack. Shinobu staggered back as if struck. Aoi lunged. She moved with a demon's speed, her needle claws aimed at Shinobu's throat. Mitsuri and Naruto intercepted, their attacks a blur of pink steel and golden light. But their movements were sluggish, their power diminished by the sterile field. Aoi, empowered by Kageyama's blood, was incredibly strong. She parried their blows, her fighting style a twisted mockery of the water-breathing she had once tried and failed to master. This has to end, Naruto grunted, forcing his sun energy through the oppressive field, his gauntlet glowing with a weak, sputtering light. We can't save her. No, Shinobu shrieked, her mind racing, desperately trying to find an antidote, a cure, a way to reverse a process she knew was irreversible. There has to be a way. If I can synthesize a counter-agent. Aoi laughed, a high, chilling sound. You cannot cure perfection, master. She lashed out, her claws raking across Mitsuri's arm, drawing blood. The sight of Mitsuri's pain snapped something in Naruto. He roared, a sound of pure, primal fury, and for a moment, his power flared, pushing back the sterile field. He slammed a full power punch into Aoi, sending her flying across the room. She crashed into a wall and slumped to the floor. For a moment, the demonic crimson in her eyes faded, and the familiar, frightened blue returned. Naruto-san, she whispered, her voice her own again. A single tear traced a path through the dust on her cheek. Please, kill me, before he makes me hurt someone else. Her body began to convulse, the black veins on her skin pulsing as Kageyama's will reasserted itself. The crimson light flared back into her eyes. Shinobu was frozen, her scientific mind at war with her grieving heart. Kanao was paralyzed, her sword feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Mitsuri was weeping, her warrior's spirit broken by the horror of it all. The choice, the impossible, soul-crushing choice, fell to Naruto. He looked at the girl who was once their friend, their family, now a puppet in a monster's game. He saw her moment of clarity, her final, desperate plea. His core belief, his unwavering vow to save everyone, was crashing against the rocks of a terrible, unavoidable reality. He couldn't save her, but he could grant her final wish. He could give her peace. He walked towards her, his movements heavy. The others cried out for him to stop, but he didn't listen. He knelt before the struggling, snarling form of Aoi Kanzaki. He placed his hand on her head, and the sun energy that flowed from it was not a weapon. It was a gentle, warm, all-encompassing light. It was not an attack. It was an absolution. Rest now, Aoi, he whispered. You're not weak. You were one of the strongest people I've ever met. The demonic energy within her was unmade not by violence, but by a power that was its perfect opposite. Her body didn't burn or explode. It simply dissolved, turning into motes of peaceful, golden light that drifted up towards the broken roof, leaving nothing behind but the faint scent of wisteria and the silence of a profound and terrible loss. Naruto remained kneeling, his head bowed. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the heartbroken sobs of the three women behind him. They hadn't just killed a demon. They had been forced to execute a friend. Kageyama had won. He had dealt them a wound far deeper than any sword could inflict. He had taken their hope and twisted it into a weapon. He had taught them the true meaning of despair. Naruto stood up and turned to face his family. His face a mask of hardened, sorrowful resolve. The war was no longer just about protecting the world. It was personal. It was a blood debt. And Naruto Uzumaki, the Sun Pillar, always paid his debts. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Dawn of a New Sun. The aftermath of Aoi's death was a heavy, silent shroud that even the bustling life of the butterfly mansion couldn't dispel. A new, somber efficiency took hold, the cheerful chatter of the young helpers replaced by a quiet, determined focus. The grief was a living thing, a hollow space at the center of their home. But Kageyama's cruelty had not broken them. It had forged them into something harder, something sharper. Despair, they had learned, could be a potent fuel. Shinobu was the most terrifyingly changed. She no longer smiled. The mask of pleasantry, the polite facade she had maintained for years, was gone, burned away in the pyre of her loss. What remained was a woman of pure, cold, incandescent rage. She spent every waking moment in her laboratory, her mind a relentless engine of vengeance, creating deadlier poisons, faster-acting antidotes, and revolutionary new medicines to increase the Slayer's survival rates. She was waging a one-woman war of science against the forces of darkness. Mitsuri trained with a ferocity that bordered on self-destruction. Her cheerful exclamations were replaced by grunts of exertion. The joy of movement supplanted by a desperate need to be stronger, faster, to never again be the one who was wounded and helpless while a friend was in peril. Her love, once a bright, boundless force for connection, was now focused into a razor-sharp protective instinct. Kanao, who had only just found her voice, now used it. She took over Aoi's duties in managing the mansion's recovery training. Her commands quiet but firm, imbued with an empathy that came from a deep understanding of what it meant to be broken. She trained alongside the other slayers, pushing them, encouraging them. Her own skill now a beacon for those struggling to find their own strength. Naruto was their anchor. He was the silent, unwavering presence that held them all together. He trained with them, ate with them, and sat with them in the long, quiet hours of the night when the grief threatened to overwhelm. He did not offer empty platitudes or easy reassurances. He simply was, a constant, steady source of warmth and strength, a sun that refused to be extinguished by the encroaching darkness. His own rage was a deep, slow-burning fire, channeled not into explosive outbursts but into a chillingly precise focus. They knew Kageyama would not remain hidden for long. He was an ideologue, a narcissist. He needed an audience. The summoning of the demon god was his endgame, and that required a specific location. A place where the veil between worlds was thin. Combining Master Tatsu's ancient lore with the data from the mines, they found it, the ruins of an ancient, forgotten capital city. Deep within the sun-swallowing forest, a place so saturated with demonic energy that even the trees grew in twisted, monstrous shapes. That was where the sigil on the maps pointed. He will K his move on the night of the new moon, when the darkness is at its absolute peak, Shinobu stated during their final strategy meeting, pointing to a date on the calendar. According to the texts, Hat is the only time the invocation can be performed. It is in 3 days. They did not request aid from the Hashira. This was not a mission for an army. Kageyama's sterile field was designed to neutralize large numbers of demon slayers. This was a personal debt, a reckoning that could only be settled by the 4 of them. It was a surgical strike, a mission of assassination. They moved on the 3rd night. 4 shadows under a starless sky. The sun-swallowing forest was a nightmare landscape, a place where the laws of nature had been warped. The air was thick and heavy, and the silence was situated by the skittering of unseen things. They found the ruins in a vast, sunken caldera. Crumbling stone buildings, remnants of a long-dead dynasty, were overgrown with black, thorny vines. And in the center, in what was once a grand plaza, Kageyama had made his stage. Hundreds of demons, his most loyal followers, stood in a silent, disciplined circle. Within the circle, dozens of human captives. The last pieces of his ritual sacrifice were chained to stone pillars. And in the very center, Kageyama stood before a massive, pulsating orb of pure darkness, a sphere of raw, negative energy. He seemed to suck the very life from the air. It was the rift, the gateway. He was chanting in a low, ancient tongue, and with every word, the orb grew larger, more unstable. Aoi had been a test. This was the performance. Right on schedule, Kageyama said without turning, his voice echoing in the unnatural silence. I must confess, I was worried you wouldn't come. A grand rebirth requires witnesses, after all. This ends tonight, Kageyama, Naruto said, his voice a low growl. The 4 of them stepped out of the shadows, their presence a sudden, defiant flare of light in the oppressive gloom. Kageyama finally turned. He was smiling, a look of serene, messianic confidence on his face. Ends. Oh no, Sun Pillar. This is where it begins. He gestured to the orb. Behold, the primordial truth, the power that will cleanse this flawed, chaotic world and usher in an age of perfect, silent order. He raised his hand, and his demon army charged. At the same time, the air shimmered, and the oppressive, energy-dampening haze of the sterile field descended upon the plaza. But this time, they were ready. Now, Shinobu yelled. She threw a volley of small glass vials into the air. They shattered, releasing a fine, atomized mist. It was not a poison. It was a catalyst, a compound she had engineered, designed to react to a specific energy signature. Mitsuri took a deep breath, her chest swelling. Love breathing. Fifth form. Wavering attachment, messy nails. She unleashed a storm of arcing, ricocheting slashes, but they weren't aimed at the demons. They were aimed at the very air itself. The sharp edges of her blade agitating Shinobu's mist, spreading it throughout the entire plaza in a swirling, invisible cloud. Kanao's eyes, which had been closed, snapped open. Her pupils were dilated, her focus absolute. Flower breathing, final form. Equinoctial scarlet spider lily. She pushed her vision to its absolute limit, seeing not the demons, not the battlefield, but the individual particles of the mist as they bonded to the energy of the sterile field. She could see the enemy's technique. Naruto, she called out, her voice clear and strong. Naruto didn't need to be told. He trusted them completely. He slammed his hands on the ground, but he didn't channel his sun energy outwards. He channeled it inwards, into the very earth beneath his feet, using Shinobu's catalyst and Kanao's perfect sight as a guide. The ground beneath the plaza began to glow with a faint, golden lattice of light. He wasn't trying to overpower the sterile field. He was hijacking it, turning Kageyama's weapon into a conduit for his own power. The oppressive field flickered. The demons, momentarily confused by the shift in energy, hesitated. It's working. Mitsuri cheered. Don't celebrate yet, Shinobu warned, drawing her blade. It will only last for a few minutes. Go. The four of them became a single, devastating force of nature. They didn't bother fighting the demon army. They moved as one, a spear aimed directly at the heart of the problem. Kageyama watched, his serene confidence finally cracking as he saw his ultimate weapon turned against him. He drew his black blade and met their charge. The battle was a maelstrom of light, shadow, and steel. Kageyama was a master, his every move a perfect counter to a Hashira's technique. But he was fighting four of them at once. Mitsuri's blade was a flowing, unpredictable whip that forced him onto the defensive. Kanao was a silent phantom at his flank, her precise strikes forcing him to divide his attention. Shinobu was a hornet, her poison-laced blade darting in, seeking the smallest opening. And Naruto was the hammer. With the sterile field temporarily neutralized, he unleashed his full power. He was a blur of golden light and black uniform, his sun gauntlets crashing against Kageyama's shadow-infused blade with the force of thunderclaps. You cannot stop this, Kageyama snarled, his elegant composure finally breaking, revealing the desperate fanatic beneath. The demon god will awaken. It will grant me the power to impose true order. He kicked Shinobu away and parried a blow from Naruto, but in doing so, he left himself open to Kanao for a fraction of a second. Her blade sliced a shallow, clean cut across his arm. It was not a debilitating wound, but it was an opening. Shinobu was already there, her blade plunging into the fresh wound. Insect breathing, dance of the centipede, hundred-legged zigzag. She injected a massive dose of a newly engineered poison, one designed not just to kill, but to disrupt the very cells that held Kageyama's demonic form together. Kageyama screamed, a sound of fury and pain as the poison warred with his demon blood. He lashed out wildly, a wave of solid shadow that threw all four of them back. He stumbled towards the pulsating orb. If I cannot rule this world, then it will be unmade. He plunged his poisoned arm deep into the rift. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The orb of darkness exploded, not with light, but with an anti-light, a wave of pure nothingness that washed over the plaza. The demon army was simply unmade, their forms dissolving into the wave. The human captives, shielded by the last vestiges of Naruto's earth-channeled energy, were unharmed but knocked unconscious. And from the rift, a presence emerged. It had no form, no shape. It was a sentient void, a being of pure, ancient malice. The demon god had been woken, not fully, but enough. Its terrible, silent consciousness brushed against them, a psychic scream of absolute hatred for all living things. Kageyama was being consumed by it, his body twisting and contorting as the primordial power he had sought to control now devoured him. But in his final moment, he looked at Naruto. A look of triumphant madness in his eyes. He had lost, but he had still succeeded in his ultimate goal. He had unleashed oblivion. Naruto, Shinobu screamed, her scientific mind unable to comprehend the metaphysical horror before them. But Naruto was already moving. He looked at his partners, at the women who had become his world. He saw the terror in their eyes, but he also saw their unwavering trust in him. He gave them a final, brilliant, confident grin. His grin. The one that promised that no matter how dark it got, everything was going to be okay. He turned to face the void. He did not power up. He did not gather his energy. He did just the opposite. He let it all go. He opened the floodgates of his soul, releasing every ounce of the sun-forged, life-affirming energy that defined his very existence. He became a star, a pure, unrestrained, incandescent sun. He did not fight the darkness. He embraced it. He flew into the heart of the void, a single point of absolute light meeting a universe of absolute shadow. There was no sound, no explosion, just a perfect, silent, all-encompassing golden white light. It washed over the ruins, over the forest, over the mountains. It was a light that did not burn, but healed. The twisted trees of the forest straightened. The black, thorny vines receded. The very air was cleansed of its ancient taint. When the light faded, the rift was gone. The demon god had been repelled, forced back into its eons-long slumber by an energy that was its perfect, absolute antithesis. Kageyama was gone, and so was Naruto. Mitsuri, Shinobu, and Kanao stood alone in the center of the now peaceful ruins, the first rays of the morning sun breaking over the horizon. There was no body, no ash, nothing. Just a profound, aching emptiness where his presence had been. Tears streamed down their faces, silent and unstoppable. They had won. They had saved the world. But they had paid the ultimate price. Shinobu knelt, her body trembling, and picked up a single small object from the ground where he had last stood. It was a smooth, flat stone, a simple piece of gravel from the butterfly mansion's courtyard. The one he had given to Kanao, all those weeks ago. The three women huddled together, united in their victory and their grief, watching the sunrise. The dawn was beautiful, a brilliant tapestry of pink and gold. But it felt cold, it felt empty, because their own sun was gone. But as the sun climbed higher, casting its warm rays upon them, Kanao, her eyes still fixed on the horizon, gasped. Mitsuri and Shinobu looked up. High in the morning sky, so high it was almost invisible, a single, golden mote of light was slowly, impossibly, descending towards them, leaving a faint trail like a falling star making its way home. Chapter 10 End.